Mom, we found a place for you. A beautiful, comfortable nursing home where you'll be cared for.
Mom, we found a place for you. A beautiful, comfortable nursing home where you'll be cared for. Those words, cold as a blade, were spoken by the very daughter Margaret Sullivan had sacrificed her entire life to love on Thanksgiving, a day meant for gratitude and family. What could drive a child to betray her mother, to push her out of the home and legacy she built with sweat and tears? And what secret, hidden in the pages of a 130-year-old recipe book, could unravel an entire family's truth? Welcome to Voices of Auntie Rose, where stories of family, forgiveness, resilience, and the courage to rise above betrayal come to life with heart and soul. We're so glad you're here, joining a community that celebrates the unbreakable human spirit. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an inspiring story. And it would be amazing if you could like this video, share it, or drop a comment letting us know what time it is and which city or country you're watching from. Your shares and comments are the greatest gift, the powerful inspiration that keeps this channel growing and spreading meaningful life lessons every single day. Now, let's dive into today's story. I was 75 years old when my daughter Emily stood in my Boston kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd taught her to make apple pie 48 years ago, and delivered the words that would shatter everything I believed about our family. "Mom, we need to talk about your future," she said, stirring her organic green tea with the sterling silver spoon from my wedding set. Her husband David stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder in that practiced way couples adopt when they've rehearsed difficult conversations. "We think it's time you moved to Sunrise Senior Living. We've already toured it, they have wonderful facilities." The words hung in the air like smoke from a burnt dinner. I stood there, holding the cast iron skillet I'd been seasoning, the same one my grandmother had brought from Ireland, feeling its weight suddenly multiply in my trembling hands. The morning sunlight streaming through my lace curtains seemed to dim, as if the universe itself recognized the cruelty of this moment. "I'm sorry." My voice came out steady, though inside my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. "You want me to leave my restaurant?" Emily exchanged a look with David. One of those silent conversations married people have when they think the elderly can't decode their facial expressions. "Mom, Sullivan's kitchen needs fresh leadership. David and I have ideas: modernization, social media presence, molecular gastronomy, things you wouldn't understand." Things I wouldn't understand. The phrase cut deeper than any knife in my professional kitchen ever could. This was the child I'd carried for 9 months, whose college tuition at Harvard Business School I'd paid by working 18-hour days, whose wedding at the Four Seasons I'd financed by selling my mother's jewelry. This was the daughter who now looked at me like I was a piece of outdated equipment that needed replacing. "Besides," David added, his voice carrying that particular brand of condescension reserved for the elderly, "you're 75, Margaret. Most people your age are playing bingo, not running restaurants. We're doing you a favor." A favor. My legs suddenly felt like overcooked pasta. I had to grip the counter to keep from collapsing. The room started spinning, and for a moment I thought I might vomit right there on the Italian marble floor I'd installed just last year. My chest tightened, not quite a heart attack, but close enough to make me wonder if this betrayal might literally kill me. "Mom, are you okay?" Emily asked, but there was no real concern in her voice, just impatience, like I was being dramatic. "See, this is exactly why we're worried. You're not well enough for this stress anymore." I forced myself to breathe, to push down the bile rising in my throat. "I've been running Sullivan's kitchen for 45 years, I managed to say. "I built it from nothing after your father died. I've never missed a single day of work." "Exactly," Emily said, setting down her cup with a delicate clink that somehow sounded like a judge's gavel. 45 years is enough, Mom. You've had your time. Now it's ours." "Your time?" As if my life had an expiration date. As if all those years of sacrifice, the birthday parties I missed to keep the restaurant open, the vacations I never took, the relationships I never pursued because Emily and the restaurant needed me, all of it was just borrowed time until they decided I was done. I looked at the kitchen around me, every tile, every fixture chosen with care. The photos on the wall showed our family history. Emily's first birthday cake that I'd made here, David's surprise 40th party, my late husband Robert in his chef's whites the day we opened. Now they wanted to erase all of it, like deleting old files from a computer. "When?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the humming of the refrigerator. We thought next month would give you enough time to adjust, David said, pulling out his phone to check something, probably their renovation budget. The contractors can start right after. Contractors. They'd already hired contractors. This wasn't a discussion, it was a notification. An eviction notice served with organic tea and practiced sympathy. That night, I couldn't eat. The very thought of food made my stomach churn. I lay in my bed, the four-poster Robert had surprised me with for our 20th anniversary, staring at the ceiling, my whole body shaking with a cocktail of rage, grief, and disbelief. I hadn't slept alone in this bed for 30 years without knowing exactly where Emily was, what she needed, how I could help her. Now I realized I'd been sleeping alone all along. By 3 a.m, exhaustion finally overtook me, but not before I made a decision. If Emily thought my time was up, she was about to learn that Margaret Sullivan still had a few recipes up her sleeve, and revenge was a dish I'd learned to serve at exactly the right temperature. The morning after that sleepless night, I forced myself to walk through Sullivan's kitchen before the staff arrived. My hand trembled as I turned the key, the same brass key Robert had placed in my palm on opening day in 1978. Each step on the worn hardwood floors echoed with memories that Emily seemed determined to demolish along with everything else. I stopped at the prep station where Robert and I had worked side by side, young and foolish and desperately in love. We'd mortgaged everything, our house, our car, even borrowed against his life insurance policy. $80,000 in 1978 money, which would be nearly $400,000 today. We'd lived on ramen noodles and hope for 2 years while building this dream. Margaret, we're either going to make it big or lose everything, Robert had said, flour dusting his dark hair as we practiced recipes until dawn. But at least we'll fail together. Together. The word tasted bitter now. After his sudden heart attack when Emily was 12, there was no more together. Just me, a grieving widow with a child to raise and a restaurant to run. While other mothers attended PTA meetings, I was negotiating with suppliers. While they helped with homework, I was balancing books until 3 a.m, Emily asleep on the office couch because we couldn't afford a babysitter. My fingers traced the burn scar on the steel counter from that Thanksgiving when I'd worked with 103-degree fever because Emily needed new winter clothes, and missing one holiday service would have meant missing her entire wardrobe budget. She'd been 15 then, embarrassed by my secondhand coat but proud when her friends complimented her designer boots. The pantry door creaked as I opened it, revealing shelves I'd installed myself while 9 months pregnant with Emily. Robert had been working 3 jobs to save for her arrival. I'd nearly fallen from the ladder twice, but those shelves had held steady for 48 years, unlike my daughter's loyalty. Mrs. Sullivan? I jumped, my heart racing. Carmen, my sous chef of 20 years, stood in the doorway, concern etched across her weathered face. "You're here early," she said softly, setting down her bag. "Everything all right?" The lie formed automatically on my lips, but looking at Carmen, who'd started as a dishwasher when her husband abandoned her with 3 kids, I couldn't pretend anymore. "Emily wants to take over the restaurant. She wants me in a nursing home." Carmen's face went pale, then flushed red with anger. That ungrateful little she caught herself, but her hands clenched into fists. "After everything you've done? You paid for her MBA, her house down payment, her fertility treatments, $150,000 for the IVF alone," I whispered, remembering the second mortgage I'd taken out secretly. "She doesn't even know about the house refinancing." I told her it was from savings. Carmen moved closer, her calloused hand covering mine. "What about when David's tech startup failed? You gave them how much?" $300,000. The number still made me dizzy. My entire retirement fund. They said it was just a loan, but that was 6 years ago. And the monthly payments for their Tesla? The private school for the twins? $4,000 a month for the car lease and insurance. $15,000 per semester for each twin at Exeter. My voice cracked. Over the past 10 years, Carmen, I've given them close to $2 million. $2 million. Carmen's sharp intake of breath echoed in the empty kitchen. Dear God, Margaret. And now they want to throw you away like yesterday's bread? The comparison was apartment. That's exactly what I was to them, stale, past my sell-by date, taking up valuable shelf space. She called me last night, Carmen said quietly. Emily. Offered me head chef position once you're gone. My knees buckled. Carmen caught me, guiding me to a chair. The betrayal was complete. Emily had already been recruiting my own staff, planning my professional funeral while I still breathed. "What did you tell her?" My voice was barely a whisper. "I told her to go straight to hell." Carmen's eyes blazed. 20 years ago, you gave me a chance when nobody would hire a single mother with no papers. You sponsored my citizenship, paid for my kids' school supplies, never asked questions when I needed advances. You think I'd forget that for some entitled brat who sees you as an obstacle? Tears burned my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not yet. She's my daughter, Carmen, my only child. No, Carmen said firmly. A daughter doesn't do this. A parasite does. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. I rushed to the bathroom, barely making it before the violent heaving began. My body rejected everything: last night's untouched dinner, this morning's coffee, the very idea that my child could be this cruel. When the retching finally stopped, I sat on the cold tile floor, my entire body shaking. Carmen found me there, helped me stand, wet paper towels pressed to my burning face. "Mrs. Sullivan, you need to fight this." "With what?" I laughed bitterly. "She's already hired contractors. David's been telling everyone I have dementia. Did you know that? Marcus from the bank told me yesterday. They're spreading rumors that I've been forgetting orders, confusing recipes. But that's insane. You remember every single order from our opening week. Doesn't matter. They've been building their case for months. Every time I forgot my reading glasses, Emily documented it. Every time I asked her to repeat something because the restaurant was loud, she wrote it down as hearing voices. I found her notebook last week. Carmen's face contorted with rage. That calculating witch. She learned from the best, I said, thinking of David's mother, Patricia, who'd sued her own elderly parents for their estate. They're coming for lunch today. With their lawyer and a psychiatrist they've hired. They want me to sign papers. Over my dead body, Carmen growled. But I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Emily had Robert's stubborn streak and my intelligence, a dangerous combination when turned against me. She'd spent years pretending to care while documenting every stumble, every moment of forgetfulness that comes with age, building her case that I was incompetent. The prep cooks started arriving, their cheerful greetings a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I watched them work, these people who'd become my real family, and wondered how many Emily had already approached with job offers. Mrs. Sullivan? James, my bartender of 15 years, approached hesitantly. "I wanted you to know. Emily called me too, promised to double my salary." My chest tightened again, that familiar crushing sensation. "And?" "I recorded the conversation," he said, pulling out his phone, "including the part where she said you were, and I quote, a senile old bat living in the past who doesn't understand that restaurants need to evolve, thought you might want it for whatever comes next." The small kindness broke something inside me. These people, who I paid modest salaries and could offer no fortune, showed more loyalty than my own flesh and blood. As the lunch rush approached, I stood in my kitchen one last time as its undisputed owner, watching my team work with the precision of a Swiss watch. Emily thought she could walk in and replace 45 years of experience with an MBA and food blogs. She was about to learn that Margaret Sullivan had survived worse than an ungrateful daughter's betrayal. The war was coming, and I finally understood I wasn't just fighting for a restaurant. I was fighting for proof that my entire life hadn't been wasted on someone who saw me as nothing more than a checkbook with a pulse. The lunch rush had ended, and I watched from my office window as Emily's Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. David emerged first, straightening his Armani suit, the one I'd bought him for his 40th birthday, back when I still believed he loved me as family rather than as a funding source. Emily followed, wearing the pearl necklace Robert had given me on our wedding day, the one I'd passed to her when she graduated from Harvard. Now those pearls hung around the neck of my executioner. But it was the third figure that made my blood turn to ice, Doctor. Harold Brennan, the psychiatrist who'd been stripped of his license in Vermont for falsely declaring elderly patients incompetent. He'd resurfaced in Massachusetts with a new practice specializing in family consulting. I knew because Carmen's cousin had lost her mother's estate to his testimony just last year. They swept into the restaurant like they owned it, which, I suppose, was exactly what they intended. Emily didn't even glance at Maria, our hostess of 8 years, who'd named her daughter after Emily. David was already on his phone, probably calculating renovation costs. Only Dr. Brennan acknowledged the staff, his predatory smile sending shivers down my spine. "Mother," Emily said, her voice dripping with false sweetness that wouldn't fool a child, "thank you for making time in your busy schedule." I remained seated at my desk, forcing them to come to me. I wasn't aware I had a choice. "Don't be dramatic," David interjected, pulling out documents from his briefcase. "We're here to help you transition with dignity." Dignity. The word burned like acid in my throat. Where was dignity in being discarded like expired produce? Dr. Brennan stepped forward, his voice oozing professional concern. "Mrs. Sullivan, I've been reviewing your medical history. The grief from your husband's death, the stress of single parenthood, running a demanding business, it's natural that cognitive decline would set in." Cognitive decline? I stood slowly, my legs steadier than they'd been all day. "Doctor, I can recite every supplier's phone number, every employee's birthday, every regular customer's order. I balanced $700,000 in receivables last week without a calculator. Which part of that suggests decline?" Emily sighed dramatically, the same sigh she'd perfected at 14 when I couldn't afford concert tickets. "Mom, you forgot Danny's birthday last month." Danny. My grandson. The knife twisted deeper. "I didn't forget. I was in the hospital with pneumonia, which you knew, since you texted me asking if I'd updated my will while I was on oxygen." David's face remained impassive, but Emily had the decency to flush slightly. Not from shame, she wasn't capable of that anymore, but from being caught. "Mrs. Sullivan," Dr. Brennan continued, "your daughter tells me you've been giving away significant sums of money that could indicate impaired judgment." "Giving away?" I laughed, but it came out sharp. Brittle. "You mean the $800,000 I gave Emily for her house? The $300,000 for David's failed business? The monthly payments for their children's education?" "Yes, doctor. I suppose giving money to ungrateful family members does indicate impaired judgment. I should have stopped years ago." Emily slammed her hand on my desk, making the framed photo of her first day of kindergarten jump. "Stop playing the victim. We've supported you for years." The room went silent. Even the kitchen noise seemed to pause. Carmen appeared in the doorway, her presence a silent threat. "Supported me?" My voice was deadly quiet. "Name one time, one single time you've supported me." "We visit you," Emily said weakly. "Twice a year. And only when you need money. We invited you for Thanksgiving. You asked me to cater it, for 40 people, at my expense. The children love you. The children don't know my middle name. They call me the restaurant lady." David stepped forward, his mask finally slipping. "Listen, Margaret, you're 75 years old. You've had a good run, but it's over. Sign the papers, take your retirement package, and go gracefully, or we'll have you declared incompetent and take everything anyway. If this scene touched your heart, tap like to let me know it resonated with you. Do you see a glimpse of your own story in theirs? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments." There it was, the truth, naked and ugly. Dr. Brennan pulled out his evaluation forms. "I've already prepared my preliminary assessment. Paranoid delusions, financial irresponsibility, social isolation." "Social isolation?" James appeared beside Carmen, followed by Maria, then Marcus the prep cook, then Sophia from accounting. One by one, my entire staff of 32 people filed into the office, surrounding Emily and her accomplices. "This woman has more family than anyone I know," James said. "Real family. The kind that doesn't wait for her to die to appreciate her." Emily's face went pale. "This is harassment. We'll call the police." "Please do," Carmen said, holding up her phone. "I've been recording this entire conversation, including the part where your husband threatened an elderly woman and your hired doctor admitted to preparing false documents." Dr. Brennan grabbed his papers, backing toward the door. "I think we should revisit this another time." "There won't be another time," I said, standing fully now, feeling every one of my 75 years but also every ounce of strength they'd given me. "Emily, you were 3 when your father died. I held you while you screamed for him every night for a year. I sold my mother's wedding ring to pay for your therapy. I worked 20-hour days so you could have dance lessons, soccer camps, prom dresses. I gave you everything: my youth, my health, my money, my love. And you look at me now like I'm nothing but an inconvenience standing between you and your inheritance." Tears finally came, but they weren't mine. Maria was crying. Carmen was crying. Even stoic James had moisture in his eyes. But Emily's face remained stone, unmoved by the pain she'd caused. "The inheritance you're so eager for?" I continued. "It doesn't exist anymore. I spent it all on you, every penny. The restaurant is mortgaged to pay for your children's school. My house has a lien from your husband's bankruptcy. My retirement account is empty because of your fertility treatments. You've already taken everything, Emily. Everything except my dignity, and that's what you came for today." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, the reality finally sinking in. There was no fortune waiting, no golden parachute. Just an old woman and a restaurant held together by second mortgages and determination. "You're lying," she whispered. I pulled out the bank statements I'd prepared, spreading them across the desk like tarot cards, revealing a bitter fortune. $2.3 million over 15 years. That's what I gave you. Here's every transfer, every check, every sacrifice documented. David grabbed the papers, his face growing paler with each page. "This can't be right. The restaurant alone is worth being." "Negative equity," Sophia said from the back. "I do the books. Mrs. Sullivan borrowed against everything to fund your lifestyle. The only thing keeping this place afloat is her reputation and these people's loyalty." Emily sank into the chair, the weight of her greed finally crushing her. But it wasn't remorse I saw in her eyes. It was rage at finding the safe empty. "Get out," I said quietly. "All of you. And don't come back." "Mom, I am not your mother. A mother deserves love, respect, gratitude. You've given me none of those. You're not my daughter. You're a parasite who happened to share my DNA. Now leave, before I call the real police." They left in silence, Dr. Brennan practically running, David pulling a stunned Emily behind him. As the door closed, my legs finally gave out. Carmen and James caught me, lowering me gently into my chair as the sobs I'd held back for years finally broke free. The restaurant was dark except for the single lamp on my desk. It was past midnight, 3 days after Emily's attempted coup, and I hadn't been able to sleep more than 2 hours at a time. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, not the cold, calculating woman who tried to destroy me, but the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, whispering, "Mama, make the scary go away." I couldn't make this scary go away. Not this time. Martha Henderson, my lawyer for the past 20 years, sat across from me, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the documents. She'd driven up from her Cape Cod retirement, specifically for this meeting, arriving with a thermos of her famous Irish coffee and the kind of no-nonsense wisdom that had made her Massachusetts' most feared estate attorney before she'd stepped down. "Margaret," she said finally, setting down the papers, "you understand what this means? Once you sign these documents, there's no going back." I nodded, my hands steady despite the magnitude of what I was about to do. "I understand perfectly. The restaurant, the recipes, everything, it will transfer to Carlos and Maria Rodriguez upon completion of the sale. Emily will have no legal claim, no grounds to contest, nothing. Carlos and Maria. My former students who'd started washing dishes in my kitchen 15 years ago, barely speaking English, sending every penny home to Mexico. I'd taught them everything: how to balance flavors, how to manage inventory, how to treat staff with dignity. They'd named their daughter after me, visited me in the hospital during my pneumonia, never forgotten a single birthday or holiday. "They're offering $800,000, Martha continued. "That's below market value, but given the mortgages and liens—" "It's more than fair," I interrupted. "And they've agreed to keep all the staff, maintain the original menu, and preserve the Sullivan's kitchen name? Every condition you requested. They've also agreed to something else." Martha smiled slightly. "They want to create Margaret's Table, a permanent reservation for you, whenever you want it, for life." The tears came then, silent and steady. Real family. That's what Carmen had called them. And she was right. "There's more," Martha said gently. "I've structured the sale proceeds into an irrevocable trust. Emily and David can't touch it, can't contest it, can't claim incompetence to access it. It's yours alone, generating enough monthly income for you to live comfortably." Comfortably. After 75 years, I might finally understand what that meant. "What about the house?" I asked, thinking of the colonial in Brookline where I'd raised Emily, where Robert's presence still lingered in every corner. "I recommend selling it too. Clear the liens, invest the remainder." You could get a nice apartment near the ocean, something manageable, somewhere fresh. Fresh. The word felt foreign but hopeful. At 75, was I allowed to start fresh? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Carlos peered around the door, his face anxious. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm sorry to interrupt. Maria and I were prepping tomorrow's vegetables, and we wanted to make sure. Are you certain about this? I stood, walking to this young man who'd become more of a son to me than my biological child ever was. Carlos, do you remember what you said when I sponsored your green card application? His eyes misted. I said someday I would repay you, and I told you the only repayment I wanted was for you to succeed. You have. Both of you. This restaurant needs young hands, fresh dreams, but with respect for what came before, Emily would have destroyed it. You'll make it grow. Maria appeared beside him, her pregnant belly showing beneath her apron, their third child, another generation that would know these kitchens. Mrs. Sullivan, we've been thinking. The purchase price we could probably get a loan for more, pay you what it's really worth. No. My voice was firm. The price is fair. Besides, you'll need capital for improvements, for weathering slow seasons. I won't have you starting in debt like Robert and I did. They exchanged glances, then Maria pulled out a worn notebook so similar to the one I'd kept all those years ago. We've been writing down all your recipes, all your techniques, just like you taught us. But this morning, Emily came by. My chest tightened. What did she want? She offered us $50,000 to withdraw our offer, Carlos said quietly. Said she'd match it if we testified that you were confused when you agreed to sell to us. The betrayal shouldn't have surprised me anymore, but somehow it cut fresh. My own daughter trying to sabotage the sale, trying to paint me as senile, still grasping for money that no longer existed. What did you tell her? Maria's gentle face hardened. I told her that Judas got 30 pieces of silver, and look how that ended. Despite everything, I laughed, really laughed for the first time in weeks. Martha cleared her throat. There's something else you should know, Margaret. I had my investigator look into Emily and David's finances. Why? Call it professional curiosity. They're broke, completely leveraged. The house is in foreclosure, David's been hiding bankruptcy papers, and Emily's been taking cash advances on credit cards I'm betting you co-signed. The room spun slightly. I gripped the desk, breathing through the nausea. How much do they owe? Close to $600,000. They've been living entirely on credit and your payments. Without your support, they have maybe 3 months before complete financial collapse. 3 months. My daughter had tried to destroy me while standing on the edge of her own cliff, too blinded by greed to see she was cutting her only safety rope. Mrs. Sullivan? Sophia appeared in the doorway holding her phone. I'm sorry, but you need to see this. She showed me the screen Emily's Facebook page. A long post about elder abuse, about children trying to protect confused parents, about the heartbreak of watching someone you love lose their mental faculties. The comments were pouring in, sympathy and outrage in equal measure. She'd tagged local news stations, elderly advocacy groups, even the state attorney general's office. She's trying to create public pressure, Martha said, reading over my shoulder. Force you to back down or risk a very public legal battle. I stared at the screen, at my daughter's carefully crafted lies, at the photo she'd chosen, one from last Christmas where I'd been exhausted from cooking for 40 people, looking every one of my 75 years. The manipulation was masterful, painting her as the concerned daughter and me as the stubborn parent refusing help. But then I noticed something else. The comments weren't all sympathetic. Several employees had already responded. James had written, I've worked for Mrs. Sullivan for 15 years. She's sharper than people half her age. This is about money, not mental health. Carmen had been less diplomatic. Your mother paid for your entire life while you treated her like dirt. Now you're mad the bank is closed. Shameful. Even some customers were chiming in, defending me, sharing stories of my kindness, my clarity, my strength. Margaret, Martha said softly, we can fight this publicly if we need to. I have enough documentation to bury them. I shook my head, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. No. Let her have her performance, sign the papers, complete the sale. I'm done fighting for people who never fought for me. At 2 a.m, in a kitchen that had been my entire world, surrounded by the people who'd become my real family, I signed my name on the documents that would free me from 45 years of memories both beautiful and bitter. Carlos and Maria signed next, their hands shaking with the weight of dreams coming true. Martha notarized everything with her efficient precision, making it all official, irreversible, final. "When?" I asked. 30 days to closing, Martha replied. Enough time to transition, to say goodbye properly. 30 days to end one life and begin another. At 75, I was about to discover who Margaret Sullivan was when she wasn't somebody's mother, somebody's employer, somebody's safety net. As everyone prepared to leave, Carmen hugged me tight. "You're doing the right thing. You know that, don't you?" I nodded against her shoulder, breathing in the scent of kitchen spices and solidarity. "I know, but knowing doesn't make it hurt less." "No," she agreed, "but hurting means you still have a heart. That's more than Emily can say." The truth of it followed me home to my empty house, where pictures of Emily still lined the walls, gap-toothed grins, graduation gowns, wedding white. I didn't take them down, not yet. I just turned them to face the wall, one by one, a funeral for the daughter I'd thought I'd raised. Tomorrow would bring new battles, more lies, additional manipulation. But tonight, for the first time in 45 years, Margaret Sullivan had chosen herself. The call came at 6:30 in the morning, 2 weeks after I'd signed the sale papers. I recognized the voice immediately, Jonathan Reed, Boston's most successful restaurant mogul, owner of 14 establishments across New England. A man who'd tried to buy Sullivan's Kitchen 3 times over the past decade, each offer more insulting than the last. If this part touched something deep inside you, hit that like button so I know it reached you. Do you see your own reflection in this character's journey? Tell me in the comments your story might just inspire someone else. Margaret, his voice was smooth as aged whiskey, dangerous as broken glass. I heard through the grapevine you're selling to those Mexican dishwashers. The slur made my blood boil, but I kept my voice steady. Carlos and Maria Rodriguez are accomplished chefs who've earned every opportunity they've received. Come now, he chuckled, that condescending laugh I'd heard at countless industry events. 800,000? I'll give you 1.5 million. Cash, today. Just tear up that little contract. 1.5 million. Nearly double Carlos and Maria's offer. Enough to live luxuriously for whatever years I had left. Enough to laugh in Emily's face when her financial house of cards collapsed. Not interested, I said. 2 million. Mr. Reed. 2.5. That's my final offer. More than triple what those people are paying. Those people. The phrase dripped with the kind of prejudice I'd fought my entire career. I thought of Carlos teaching my grandson Danny to make tamales last Christmas, the only real attention that child had received all day. I thought of Maria singing Mexican lullabies to calm my nerves during my pneumonia recovery. Mr. Reed, I could sell to you for 10 million, and within 6 months, Sullivan's Kitchen would be another soulless Reed Group property. No thank you. You're making a mistake, Margaret, a very costly mistake. Maybe, but it's mine to make. The line went dead, but I knew this wasn't over. Jonathan Reed didn't become successful by accepting rejection gracefully. Within hours, the harassment began. Health inspectors arrived, citing anonymous complaints about violations that didn't exist. The fire marshal showed up, claiming concerns about capacity permits that had been approved for decades. A building inspector insisted our perfectly functional kitchen needed immediate renovations. Carlos found me in the office, surrounded by violation notices, my hands shaking with rage. "Mrs. Sullivan, what's happening?" "Jonathan Reed is happening," I said, showing him the cessation order that would shut us down in 72 hours unless we completed impossible renovations. Maria appeared, her face pale. "The bank just called. They're saying there's a problem with our loan approval. Something about irregular documentation." The pieces clicked together. Reed had connections everywhere, banks, city officials, inspection departments. He was systematically destroying the sale, knowing Carlos and Maria couldn't fight back. But he'd forgotten something crucial. After 45 years in this business, I had connections too. I picked up my phone and called Patricia Walsh, the state attorney general who'd been eating at my restaurant since she was a law student surviving on my free soup program for struggling students. Then I called Michael Chen, the investigative reporter who'd won a Pulitzer exposing Reed's illegal labor practices, a story that had started with a tip from me. Finally, I called Father Anthony from Street, Mary's, whose soup kitchen I'd supplied for 30 years and whose congregation included half the city council. "Margaret Sullivan is under attack," I told each of them. "And I need help." While I marshaled my forces, Emily launched her own offensive. She showed up at the restaurant during the lunch rush with a camera crew from Channel 7, playing the role of the concerned daughter to perfection. "My mother is being exploited," she told the reporter, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. "She's selling our family legacy to strangers for a fraction of its value because she's not thinking clearly." I watched from the kitchen as she performed, noting the new designer dress she somehow afforded despite her supposed bankruptcy. David stood behind her, nodding gravely, playing the supportive son-in-law. "Should we go out there?" Carmen asked, her hand on my shoulder. "No, let her perform. The truth has a way of surfacing." But Emily wasn't done. She'd brought props, photo albums showing our perfect family, doctor's notes I'd never seen before suggesting cognitive decline, even a tearful testimony from her twins about missing their grandmother. My chest constricted watching those children 9 years old and already trained to lie for their parents' benefit. Danny, the elder twin, kept looking at the camera uncomfortably, his mouth moving in clearly rehearsed lines. Sophie, his sister, was more convincing, but I caught her glancing off camera repeatedly, seeking approval from Emily. "Mrs. Sullivan?" A gentle voice interrupted my observation. I turned to find a young woman, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a press badge reading Boston Globe. "I'm Jennifer Martinez," she said. "I'm not here about the story. I'm here because my grandmother went through something similar. Her children tried to have her declared incompetent to steal her business, a small bakery in Somerville." "What happened?" She fought back, lost everything in legal fees, but kept her dignity. "She died last year, at 93, still sharp as a tack." Jennifer pulled out a card. "If you want to tell your side, really tell it, I'll listen." Before I could respond, chaos erupted in the dining room. Jonathan Reed had arrived, flanked by lawyers, approaching Emily with documents in hand. "Mrs. Whitman," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I have here a purchase agreement for Sullivan's Kitchen at 3 times the current offer. All your mother has to do is sign, and your family's financial troubles are over." The trap was elegant. Emily's eyes widened at the number $2.5 million. Even if she got nothing directly, she knew I'd never let my grandchildren starve. Reed was betting on my weakness, using my love for those children as leverage. "That's generous of you, Mr. Reed," Emily said, her voice breathless with greed. "Your mother is inside?" Reed asked. "She's confused today. Perhaps you should speak with me and David about the arrangements." That's when Danny did something unexpected. The boy who'd been parroting lies suddenly pulled away from his mother and ran into the kitchen, straight to me. "Grandma," he whispered, "Mom said if I didn't say those things we'd lose our house and it would be my fault." I held him tight, feeling his small body shake with suppressed sobs. 9 years old and already carrying adult burdens. "It's not your fault, sweetheart. None of this is." Sophie followed her brother, and for a moment, I had both grandchildren in my arms, probably for the last time. Their allegiance to me would cost them dearly when Emily discovered it. Reed entered the kitchen like he already owned it, his expensive shoes clicking on floors Robert had laid with his own hands. "Margaret, let's discuss this reasonably." "There's nothing to discuss. Your daughter seems to think otherwise. She's agreed to pursue power of attorney if you refuse my offer. I have 3 psychiatrists ready to testify about your diminished capacity." "Bought and paid for, I assume?" He smiled, sharp as a knife. "Expertly credentialed. Your dishwasher friends can't protect you from that." Carlos stepped forward, all 5'6" of him facing down Reed's 6-foot frame. "Those dishwashers have names. And Mrs. Sullivan doesn't need protection. She needs respect, something you wouldn't understand." Reed laughed. "Respect doesn't pay bills, boy." The slur was the final straw, but before I could respond, Martha Henderson swept into the kitchen, followed by Patricia Walsh and 3 state troopers. "Mr. Reed," Patricia said coolly, "I have here 17 health code violations filed against Sullivan's Kitchen in the last 6 hours, all traced to anonymous tips from your phone number. Filing false reports is a crime." Reed's face paled slightly. "You can't prove." "Actually, we can." Michael Chen appeared with his photographer. "I've been recording everything, including your offer to bribe city inspectors and your threat to use psychiatric testimony to force this sale." The room held its breath. Reed looked between the officials, the cameras, the witnesses, calculating his chances. "This isn't over," he finally said, his composure cracking. "Yes, it is. I said, finding strength in the army of support around me. Get out of my kitchen and take my daughter with you. Emily had been hovering in the doorway, watching her million-dollar dream evaporate. Mother, please. You chose your side, Emily. You chose greed over family, manipulation over love, money over your own mother. Now live with that choice. As the crowd dispersed, Reed retreating, Emily screaming about lawsuits, cameras rolling. Danny tugged on my apron. Grandma, are you really selling the restaurant? I knelt to his level, looking into eyes that reminded me painfully of Emily at that age, before life and greed had hardened her. Yes, sweetheart, but I'm not going anywhere. Sometimes we have to let go of places to hold on to people who matter. He nodded solemnly, then whispered, I wish you were my mom instead. The words broke my heart. But they also confirmed what I'd known for weeks. Emily had lost more than money or property in this war. She'd lost her children's respect, their love, their trust. And unlike money, those things couldn't be stolen back. The leather-bound book weighed heavy in my hands, its pages yellowed with age and splattered with 4 generations of kitchen accidents. My great-grandmother's recipe book, written in her careful script when she arrived from Ireland in 1892, updated by each generation of Sullivan women who followed. 130 years of family history reduced to ingredients and instructions, yet somehow containing our entire soul. I sat alone in the restaurant at 4 a.m, 2 weeks before the closing date, surrounded by boxes and memories. The book lay open to Robert's favorite recipe, his grandmother's brown bread that we'd served every day for 45 years. His handwriting in the margins still made my chest ache. Margaret makes this better than anyone. Lucky man I am. Emily had no idea this book existed. For 20 years, I'd kept it locked in the safe behind the painting in my office, the landscape Robert had bought me for our first anniversary, back when we could barely afford groceries. Emily had walked past that painting thousands of times, never knowing the treasure hidden behind it. She'd assumed our recipes were in the computer system, easily transferable, another asset to liquidate. But the real Sullivan's kitchen, the soul of it, lived in these handwritten pages. My mother's notes on adapting recipes during rationing, my grandmother's substitutions during the Depression, great-grandmother Molly's original soda bread that had fed hungry immigrants in Boston's Irish Quarter. This wasn't just a cookbook, it was our family's survival guide, our love letter to feeding others when we barely had enough ourselves. Mrs. Sullivan? I startled, quickly closing the book. Carlos stood in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Couldn't sleep either? I asked. He shook his head, entering slowly. Maria's worried. She thinks we're stealing something precious from you. You're not stealing anything. I'm choosing to give it. But your daughter. My daughter sees dollar signs, not heritage. She'd sell these recipes to the highest bidder, probably to Reed, who'd mass-produce them until they lost all meaning. Carlos sat beside me, his presence comfortable in the pre-dawn quiet. We'd spent countless hours like this over the years, prepping for busy days, sharing silence and understanding. There's something I need to tell you, I said, my decision crystallizing. Something Emily doesn't know. I retrieved the book, placing it between us. Carlos gasped, recognizing its significance immediately. He'd seen me reference it occasionally, though I'd never let anyone read it fully. This is everything. Every real recipe, every secret technique, 4 generations of Sullivan women, plus Robert's contributions. The computer system has basic versions, but this I traced the worn cover. This has the truth. Mrs. Sullivan, I can't. Yes, you can, and you will. I opened to a page marked with a faded ribbon. This stuffing recipe? It fed 30 people during the blizzard of '78 when we opened our doors to stranded strangers. This soup? My mother made it with stone and prayers during the Depression, and somehow it filled bellies and hearts. Tears rolled down Carlos's cheeks as he understood the magnitude of what I was offering. But this belongs to Emily. To your grandchildren. No, my voice was firm. It belongs to those who understand that food is love, not commodity. Emily would auction it on eBay. Danny might understand someday, but by then it would be too late. A sound from the dining room made us both freeze. Footsteps, careful and deliberate. Carlos reached for his phone to call the police, but I stopped him. I knew those footsteps, had heard them pacing overhead for 18 years. Emily emerged from the shadows, and my blood went cold. She wasn't alone. David followed, along with a man I didn't recognize, carrying professional camera equipment. Getting an early start, Mother? Her voice was triumphant. Or should I say, conspiring to hide assets during a sale. The stranger stepped forward, his camera trained on the book. Mrs. Whitman, I'm getting everything. The book? Their faces, the clandestine meeting. Perfect evidence, David interrupted, of mental incompetence and fraudulent transfer of assets. That book is worth hundreds of thousands to the right buyer. Emily approached slowly, like a predator certain of its prey. Did you really think I didn't know about the book? I've known for years. I was just waiting for you to get desperate enough to reveal it. My heart shattered. She'd known. All those times I'd thought I was protecting our heritage, she'd been watching, waiting, planning. I hired a private investigator 3 years ago, she continued, her smile cold. He documented every time you accessed that safe. We have photos, Margaret, timestamps. A clear pattern of you hiding valuable assets from your family. My family? The laugh that escaped me was bitter. You stopped being family the day you saw me as a bank account instead of a mother. Drama won't work in court, David said, pulling out his phone. Our lawyer is drafting an injunction now. That book is marital property, part of Robert's estate, and therefore, mine. We all turned. Danny stood in the kitchen doorway, still in his pajamas, Sophie beside him. Emily's face went white. What are you doing here? She hissed. Dad dropped us off, Sophie said quietly. He said he couldn't watch us anymore, that you chose money over family and he was done. The room went silent. Emily's phone buzzed a text from her husband. Even from across the room I could see the subject line, divorce papers filed. No, Emily whispered, her carefully constructed world crumbling. He can't, we have a prenup. Based on assets you don't actually have, David said slowly, realization dawning. Emily, without your mother's money, without this restaurant, we have nothing. Less than nothing. The cameraman lowered his equipment, sensing the shift in power dynamics. The book, Emily said desperately, lunging toward the table. If we have the book, we can sell it, start over. Carlos moved faster, sweeping the book into his arms, holding it like a baby. That's theft, David shouted. We'll call the police. Please do, Martha Henderson said from the doorway, having arrived for our scheduled 5 a.m. meeting. I'd love to explain to them about breaking and entering, conspiracy to commit elder fraud, and now attempted robbery. Behind her stood Patricia Walsh and 2 state troopers again, but this time they weren't here for Reed. Mrs. Whitman, Mr. Whitman, Patricia said formally, we've received multiple complaints about elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. We need you to come with us for questioning. Emily's face cycled through emotions, rage, fear, disbelief, and finally pure hatred directed at me. You planned this, she spat. You evil witch. You destroyed my life. No, Emily. You destroyed your own life the moment you decided I was worth more dead than alive. As the police led them away, Emily screaming about lawsuits and revenge, Danny approached me slowly. Grandma, what's in the book? I knelt down, gathering both children close. Stories, recipes, love, everything your mother never valued. Can we stay with you? Sophie asked in a small voice. I looked at Martha, who nodded slightly. Legal complications aside, someone needed to care for these children. For now, I said carefully, we'll figure out the rest together. Carlos still held the book, looking uncomfortable. I stood, took it from him, and placed it firmly back in his hands. This belongs to Sullivan's kitchen. You are Sullivan's kitchen now. Teach Maria every recipe. Add your own. Make it live. But the children... I looked at Danny and Sophie, their faces uncertain but hopeful. They'll learn too if they want. The real recipes. Not just food, but what it means to feed people with love, not greed. As the sun rose over Boston, painting the restaurant in golden light, I realized the great irony. Emily had schemed for years to steal something she thought was hidden, never understanding that the real treasure wasn't the book or the recipes or even the restaurant. It was the knowledge that food made with love and served with dignity was worth more than all the money she'd ever craved. And that was something she could never steal, because she'd never taken the time to understand it existed. Mrs. Sullivan, Jennifer Martinez from the Globe appeared, notepad ready. Can I quote you about what just happened? I considered for a moment, then nodded. You can write this. Margaret Sullivan's greatest recipe was never written down. It was teaching others that kindness is the most important ingredient in any dish. My daughter forgot that recipe, but my real inheritors, I looked at Carlos and Maria, at my grandchildren, at Carmen and the arriving staff. They know it by heart. The book would survive. The recipes would flourish. And Emily would have to live with the knowledge that she'd traded her heritage for greed and ended up with nothing but handcuffs and regret. The locksmith arrived at 7 that morning, just as the last police car disappeared with Emily and David. My hands were steady as I watched him work, changing every lock in the restaurant, and my home locks Emily had keys to, had entered whenever she pleased, treating my spaces like extensions of her own property. Danny and Sophie sat in the corner booth, still in their pajamas, eating pancakes Carmen had made. They'd barely spoken since their father's abandonment, but their eyes followed my every move with a mixture of fear and hope that broke my heart. "Mrs. Sullivan," Martha said quietly, pulling me aside, "Child Services will need to be notified. The children can't just—" "I know," I interrupted, "but not yet. Let them eat. Let them feel safe for just a moment." Martha nodded, understanding. She'd handled enough family destructions to know that sometimes legal requirements had to wait for human ones. Carlos and Maria were in the kitchen, preparing for the lunch rush as if the morning's drama hadn't happened. But I could see them occasionally touching the recipe book, now safely stored in a new lockbox, like a talisman. Their reverence for it was everything Emily's greed wasn't. "Grandma?" Sophie's small voice carried across the restaurant. "Are we going to foster care?" The question I'd been dreading. I walked over, sitting beside them, choosing truth over comfort. "I don't know, sweetheart. Your mom and dad make those decisions, and right now they're both unable to." "Dad said Mom chose money over us," Danny said flatly. "He said she's been stealing from you for years and he couldn't watch anymore." David, weak, complicit David, had finally grown a conscience. Too little, too late, but at least he'd removed the children from Emily's toxic influence. "Your father left you here?" "He drove us here at 5 this morning," Sophie said. "Said you were the only real parent any of us ever had. Then he drove away." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number that turned out to be David. "I'm checking into rehab. Gambling addiction. Emily never knew. I've been stealing from her while she stole from you. The kids deserve better. Please take care of them." The layers of deception in my daughter's life were staggering. She'd been robbing me while her husband robbed her, both of them too consumed by greed to notice they were destroying everything. "Mrs. Sullivan?" A woman in a severe suit entered, accompanied by a social worker I recognized from the restaurant's charity events. "I'm Linda Patterson from Child Protective Services. We received a call about abandoned minors." My heart sank, but I stood tall. "They're my grandchildren. Their father left them here this morning. And their mother was arrested 2 hours ago for elder fraud and conspiracy." Linda's expression softened slightly. She'd seen enough to recognize a family in crisis versus a dangerous situation. "The children can stay with you temporarily, pending emergency custody hearings. But Mrs. Sullivan, at 75, taking on 2 traumatized 9-year-olds. I raised their mother alone after my husband died," I said firmly. "I've run this restaurant for 45 years. I've survived betrayal, attempts at forced institutionalization, and a daughter who saw me as nothing but a wallet. I think I can handle 2 children who need love." While Linda processed paperwork, I made phone calls. First to my doctor, scheduling the physical that would prove my health. Then to my accountant, confirming I could financially support the children without the restaurant income. Finally, to a family therapist, because these children would need more than love to heal from their parents' abandonment. Jennifer Martinez from the Globe arrived as scheduled, her photographer discreetly capturing the scene not for sensationalism but for truth. "Mrs. Sullivan, your daughter's arrest is already trending locally. People are calling it the ultimate betrayal. How do you respond?" I looked at Danny and Sophie, then at my staff, my real family preparing for customers despite the morning's chaos. "Write this," I said carefully. "Money makes people do terrible things, but it also reveals who they really are. My daughter showed me she values wealth over family. My employees showed me they value loyalty over bribes. These children's father showed he values their well-being over pride. And I've learned that sometimes the family you choose is more real than the one you're born into." "What about the restaurant? The sale continues?" In 3 days, Sullivan's Kitchen becomes the Rodriguez family's restaurant, but the spirit, the soul of feeding people with love that continues. The lunch rush began, and something beautiful happened. Word had spread through social media about the morning's events. Customers poured in not for gossip, but for support. Regular patrons who'd watched Emily grow up, who'd celebrated their own milestones here, who understood that this place meant more than food. Mr. Chen, who'd had his first date with his wife here 40 years ago, pressed an envelope into my hand. "For the grandchildren's college fund," he said quietly. "Real family helps family." Mrs. Foster, whose son Emily had bullied in high school, hugged me tight. "You deserved better," she whispered. "But you'll give those babies what Emily never could, actual love." By 3 o'clock, we'd served more customers than any day in the past 5 years. Carlos was overwhelmed, Maria was crying with gratitude, and the staff was energized by the community's support. But the day's surprises weren't over. Jonathan Reed walked in at 4, alone this time, his arrogance replaced by something I'd never seen: humility. "Margaret," he said, approaching slowly, "may I speak with you privately?" Every instinct screamed no, but curiosity won. We went to my office, soon to be Carlos's office. "I owe you an apology," he began, surprising me. "What I tried to do was wrong, but I need you to understand why." "I don't need to understand anything from you. My father built Reed Enterprises by destroying family restaurants like yours," he continued anyway. "He taught me that sentimentality was weakness, that heritage was just marketing. But seeing you choose legacy over profit, people over money, it made me realize something." He pulled out a photograph: Reed's father with a young Jonathan outside a small restaurant. "This was our family's place, before he became corporate, before he forgot that food was about community. He sold it for seed money, built an empire, died alone in a penthouse, estranged from everyone who'd ever loved him. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm 48 years old, divorced 3 times, and my own children won't speak to me. I have 14 restaurants and no one to eat with. You have nothing on paper but everything that matters." He stood to leave, then turned back. "The Rodriguez family will face challenges. The industry is brutal. When they do, tell them to call me. Not for a buyout, for help, real help." After he left, I sat stunned. Jonathan Reed offering actual assistance? The world had truly turned upside down. That evening, as the restaurant closed, we held an impromptu family meeting: Carlos, Maria, Carmen, the entire staff, and my grandchildren. We discussed the transition, the recipes, the future. Danny and Sophie listened intently, absorbing the lesson their mother never learned: that business could be personal, success could include kindness, and family wasn't always blood. "Mrs. Sullivan," Maria said, her hand on her pregnant belly, "we want to name the baby Margaret, if it's a girl. So she grows up knowing that strength isn't about taking from others, but giving despite the pain." I cried then, really cried, for everything lost and everything found. Emily had tried to steal my life, but instead she'd freed me to discover what actually mattered. As we locked up, Danny took my hand. "Grandma, Mom used to say you were too soft for business. But you're the strongest person I know." "Strength isn't about being hard," I told him. "It's about staying soft despite every reason to become bitter. Your mother forgot that, but you won't." The recipe book sat in its new safe, protected but not hidden. Tomorrow, Carlos would begin learning the first recipes. Maria would add her family's traditions. The book would grow, evolve, live. And somewhere in a jail cell, Emily would have to confront the price of her greed, not just legal consequences, but the loss of everything she'd claimed to want: her mother's love, her children's respect, her husband's partnership, and a heritage that could have been hers if she'd only understood its true value. Danny hadn't spoken during dinner. While Sophie chatted nervously about school, about friends, about anything except their parents, her brother pushed meatloaf around his plate, building walls and destroying them, lost in 9-year-old contemplations too heavy for his age. I found him later in the restaurant's storage room, sitting between boxes of canned tomatoes, holding something I hadn't seen in years: Emily's childhood diary, the one with the unicorn cover she'd cherished at his age. "Where did you find that?" I asked gently, sitting beside him on the cold concrete floor. "Mom's closet. Before everything got bad." His voice was hollow. "She wrote about you all the time, about Dad, Grandpa Robert, about how much she loved this restaurant. He opened it to a page marked with a faded ticket stub from a Red Sox game. Emily's 10-year-old handwriting filled the page. Mom worked a double shift today so we could go to Fenway tomorrow. She looks tired, but she keeps smiling. She's the best mom in the whole world. The knife in my chest twisted deeper. When had that little girl who saw my sacrifices transformed into the woman who saw only dollar signs? She loved you once, Danny said. Not a question, but a statement seeking explanation. Yes. What happened? How do you explain greed to a child? How do you tell a 9-year-old that sometimes love gets buried under ambition, that some people mistake being given everything for being owed everything? I don't know, I admitted. Sometimes people change in ways we can't predict or prevent. Dad says she got sick. Not body sick, but soul sick. David's rare moment of insight. Soul sick, perhaps the most accurate diagnosis of Emily's condition. Danny turned the page, revealing a photo tucked between sheets. Emily at 16, flower in her hair, laughing as she helped me prep for Thanksgiving service. We'd served 300 meals free that day to anyone who needed them. She'd been so proud, telling everyone how her mom fed the whole neighborhood. She used to help people, Danny said wonderingly. Like you do. She did. Maybe she could remember. Maybe if we showed her these… Danny. I pulled him close, feeling his thin shoulders shake. Your mom has to want to remember. Right now she's too angry to see anything but what she thinks she's lost. She lost us, he whispered. Doesn't that matter? Before I could answer, Martha appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. Margaret, we have a problem. Emily's made bail. My blood went cold. How? They were broke. Her lawyer found an investor. Someone who wants to challenge the restaurant sale. She'll be here with a court order within the hour. I stood, pulling Danny up with me. Take the children home. Call Patricia Walsh. I can't reach Patricia. Or your other contacts. Emily's lawyer has filed injunctions against everyone, claiming conspiracy and elder abuse. Margaret, she's coming for the children. Sophie appeared, having heard everything, her face pale with fear. We won't go with her. She doesn't want us. She wants Grandma's money through us. The truth from a 9-year-old's mouth. Emily had found another angle. Emergency custody of her children would give her standing to challenge my competency, claim their inheritance rights, and potentially overturn the sale. Mrs. Sullivan, Carlos, emerged from the kitchen. We can take the children out the back. No. My voice was firm despite my racing heart. We don't run. We don't hide. We face this. Within 40 minutes, Emily arrived with an entourage: her lawyer, a child welfare officer, 2 security guards, and someone I recognized with sinking heart. Dr. Patricia Downs, a child psychologist known for supporting paying parents in custody battles. Emily looked different. Jail had aged her 5 years and 2 days. Her designer clothes were replaced with a simple suit that didn't quite fit, but her eyes, cold, calculating, remained unchanged. My children, she said, not looking at them but at me. You'll return them immediately, or I'll add kidnapping to the elder abuse charges. Dodd left us here, Sophie shouted. You were in jail. Emily's gaze flicked to her daughter with annoyance, not concern. Your father is unfit. He's entered rehabilitation for gambling addiction. I'm your only legal guardian. Mrs. Whitman, the child welfare officer, interjected, looking uncomfortable. The children need to come with us while the courts determine proper custody. Danny stepped behind me, gripping my sweater. Please, Grandma. It's okay, I said, though everything in me screamed otherwise. Sometimes we have to… No. Danny's voice cracked. Mom, why are you doing this? You don't want us. You never wanted us. We were just things to you, like Grandma's money. Emily's mask slipped for a second, revealing something that might have been pain or might have been rage. You're confused, Daniel. Dr. Downs will help you understand that your grandmother has been filling your head with lies. The only liar here is you. Sophie stepped forward, my brave granddaughter, holding her brother's diary pages. We found your notebooks, the ones where you planned to put Grandma in a home, where you calculated how much you'd inherit, where you called us expensive burdens. The room went silent. Emily's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, but she waved him off. Children imagine things. Page 47, Danny recited from memory. The twins cost $4,000 monthly. Once Mom's declared incompetent, that expense transfers to her estate. Net gain, $48,000 annually. The child welfare officer's expression shifted from uncomfortable to alarmed. Even Dr. Downs looked unsettled. You wrote about us like we were debits and credits, Sophie added, tears streaming. Never once did you write that you loved us. Emily's composure finally cracked. I gave you everything. Private school, perfect house, opportunities. Grandma's money gave us those things, Danny interrupted. You gave us fear. Fear that if we weren't perfect, we'd be too expensive. Fear that love was conditional on good grades and no problems. From the mouths of babes, the truth that destroyed Emily's case more effectively than any legal argument. Mrs. Whitman, the child welfare officer said slowly, perhaps we should postpone this transfer pending a full investigation. They're my children, Emily shrieked, lunging forward. The security guards had to restrain her. I own them. They're mine. Everything is mine. The restaurant, the money, the children, all mine. In that moment, with those words, Emily sealed her fate. The room was full of witnesses to her breakdown, her possessive rage, her inability to see her children as humans rather than property. Martha, who'd been recording everything on her phone, stepped forward. Officers, I believe we have enough evidence here that Mrs. Whitman is currently unfit for custody. The children should remain with their grandmother pending emergency hearings. Dr. Downs, perhaps sensing the tide turning and her reputation at stake, quickly distanced herself. I haven't completed any evaluation. I'm here merely as an observer. Emily turned on her, then her lawyer, then finally me, her face contorted with fury that transformed her features into something unrecognizable. You did this, she hissed at me. You turned them against me. You stole everything, my inheritance, my husband, my children. No, Emily, I said sadly. You threw them away. $1 at a time. As security escorted her out, still screaming about ownership and theft, Danny and Sophie collapsed against me, sobbing with the relief of children who'd stood up to a monster and won. She'll be back, Martha warned quietly. This isn't over. I know, I said, holding my grandchildren tight, but she showed everyone who she really is. That matters. That night, as I tucked Danny into bed in what used to be Emily's childhood room, he asked, Grandma, am I going to become like her? Why would you think that? I'm her son. What if it's in my blood? The greed, the coldness? I sat on his bed, remembering similar fears I'd had after my own father's abandonment. You stood up to her today. You chose truth over comfort, love over money. That's not in your blood, Danny, that's in your character. And character is something we choose, every day. He considered this, then pulled out the unicorn diary. Can we keep this? To remember who she used to be? Of course. Maybe someday she'll remember too. I kissed his forehead, hoping for his sake that was true, but knowing that some people lose themselves so completely that there's no path back. Emily had chosen money over everything else, and now she had neither money nor family. The real inheritance, love, loyalty, recipes written in the margins of life, would go to those who understood its value. Carlos and Maria, Danny and Sophie, and the community that had become our true family. Monday arrived with the weight of finality. In 72 hours, Sullivan's kitchen would officially belong to Carlos and Maria. The papers were signed, the money transferred to my trust, and my new apartment near Cape Cod was waiting. Yet here I stood at 3 a.m, alone in the kitchen where I'd spent more nights than I could count, unable to say goodbye. My fingers traced the burn mark on the prep counter from 1983, when Emily had tried to help with Thanksgiving dinner and knocked over a hot pan. She'd been 7, devastated by her mistake, crying that she'd ruined everything. I'd held her then, assured her that marks like these made a kitchen real, gave it character. Now I wondered if she remembered that moment at all. The industrial mixer hummed its familiar tune as I prepared one last batch of Irish brown bread, Robert's grandmother's recipe, the one that started everything. My hands moved automatically through motions performed thousands of times, measuring, mixing, kneading, muscle memory deeper than thought. Couldn't sleep either? I turned to find Carlos in the doorway, followed by Maria, Carmen, James, and one by one, the entire night shift. They'd all come, without being asked, for this final service under my ownership. We thought you might want company, Maria said softly, her hand resting on her growing belly. For the last time, There will be other times, but not like this, Carmen interrupted. Tonight, you're still the owner. Tomorrow, you're a guest. Tonight matters. She was right. Everything felt different knowing it was ending. The familiar creak of the walk-in freezer door sounded like a goodbye. The whistle of the steam from the coffee machine felt like a farewell song. We worked in companionable silence, preparing for the morning rush that I wouldn't officially oversee. Each person gravitated toward their specialty, James crafting his signature hollandaise, Carmen prepping her perfect knife cuts, Maria humming while she shaped pastries. At 5:30, an unexpected visitor appeared, Father Anthony from St. Mary's, carrying a worn Bible and a gentle smile. "Margaret," he said, "I heard tonight was important. Thought you might want a blessing." In the pre-dawn quiet of a commercial kitchen, surrounded by steel and steam, we formed a circle. Father Anthony's words were simple but profound, blessing not just the space but the years of service, the meals that had nourished bodies and souls, the sanctuary this place had provided for so many, including me. "Lord," he concluded, "bless the hands that have worked here, the hearts that have loved here, and the new chapter beginning. May this kitchen continue to be a place where hunger, both physical and spiritual, finds satisfaction." When he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room, including mine. The morning rush began at 7, but word had somehow spread that this was my last day as owner. The restaurant filled beyond capacity. Regular customers from 40 years of service appeared, some I hadn't seen in decades. Mrs. Chen, now 93, shuffled in with her walker, her grandson supporting her. "I was here opening day," she announced to the room. "Margaret served me when I was a young widow with nothing. Never charged me full price, never let me leave hungry." Tom Bradley, who'd been homeless for 3 years in the 90s, now a successful contractor, stood up. "This woman fed me every day when I had nothing. Gave me dignity with soup and bread. Saved my life." One by one, they shared stories. The couple who'd met here and returned every anniversary for 30 years. The single mother who'd been hired when no one else would take a chance on her. The teenager who'd learned to cook here and now ran his own restaurant in California. Emily would have seen dollar signs in this room, potential customers, revenue streams, profit margins. But I saw what she'd never understood: wealth that couldn't be deposited in a bank. Around noon, Danny and Sophie arrived with their social worker for their scheduled visit. They'd been staying with me temporarily while courts determined custody, each day a gift I didn't take for granted. "Grandma," Sophie said, running to me, "we have something for you." They'd created a scrapbook, photos I didn't know existed, pictures they'd secretly taken over the years of me cooking, serving, laughing with customers. The last page held a drawing of the restaurant, with all of us standing in front, holding hands. At the bottom, in Danny's careful printing, "Our real home." "Your mother," I began. "Called this morning," Danny said flatly. "From jail. Again." Emily had been rearrested for violating her restraining order and attempting to fraudulently access my bank accounts using old documents. Her lawyer had dropped her. Her husband had filed for divorce. She'd lost everything in her grab for everything. "She wanted us to testify that you coached us," Sophie added, "that you made us lie about her." "What did you say?" "The truth," Danny replied simply. "That she never saw us as anything but expenses." The social worker, Mrs. Patterson, pulled me aside. "The judge is leaning toward permanent custody with you. Your age is a concern, but the children's testimony about their parents, it's compelling." As the afternoon wore on, the crowd grew. Jonathan Reed appeared with a massive arrangement of flowers and a card that simply read, "To new beginnings and old wisdom." He didn't stay, didn't make it about him, just paid his respects and left. Around 4 o'clock, something extraordinary happened. The mayor arrived with a proclamation declaring today Margaret Sullivan Day in Boston, recognizing 45 years of service to the community. The walls that had heard so many stories now witnessed one more, my own story, being honored by the city I'd served. But the most unexpected visitor came at 5:30, just as the dinner rush was beginning. David, Emily's husband, stood in the doorway, 30 days sober according to the chip he showed me, looking healthier but haunted. "I need 2 minutes," he said. "Not for Emily, for me." Against my better judgment, I agreed, stepping outside with him. "I'm testifying," he said without preamble, "against Emily, about the fraud, the manipulation, everything." "Why?" "Because those kids deserve better. Because you deserved better. because maybe if I do one right thing, I can live with all the wrong I've done." He pulled out a folder, bank statements, emails, recordings. Evidence of Emily's schemes going back years, including plans to have me declared incompetent that predated any actual concerns about my health. "She never loved anyone," he said quietly. "Not me, not the kids, not you. She loved the idea of what we could give her. She loved us once." "No," David interrupted. "I've been with her for 15 years. She talked about you like a bank account from day one. When Margaret dies, never when Mom dies. You were never a person to her, just an obstacle to inheritance." The truth, brutal and final, from the person who'd known Emily best. As he left, pressing the evidence folder into my hands, the dinner service reached its peak. Carlos and Maria worked the kitchen with the precision of surgeons and the passion of artists. The recipes from the sacred book were being honored, enhanced by their own traditions, creating something both familiar and new. At 8 o'clock, as the sun set over Boston, I stood in the dining room one last time as owner. The warm light caught the photographs on the walls, the scratches on the floor from 45 years of chair legs, the slight wear pattern in the carpet from servers' repeated paths. Carmen raised a glass of wine, we all did, even Danny and Sophie with their juice. To Margaret Sullivan, she said, who taught us that a restaurant isn't about food, it's about family. To the woman who fed bodies and souls, James added. To the mother we chose, Carlos said, his voice thick with emotion. To Grandma, Danny and Sophie said together, who showed us what love really looks like. I couldn't speak. 45 years of words served with meals, and now, at the end, silence said everything. At closing time, I performed the ritual one last time, checking locks, adjusting thermostats, turning off lights. Each switch felt like closing a chapter. Tomorrow, Carlos would do this. Tomorrow, it would be his responsibility, his privilege, his burden. You've made it this far, go ahead and hit like to let me know you're still with me. You know, every share you make might help someone out there find a little hope. And before we continue, don't forget to subscribe, because who knows, the next story might just touch your heart. But tonight, for one last moment, Sullivan's kitchen was mine. I stood in the dark restaurant, remembering Robert's laugh echoing off these walls, Emily's first steps between these tables, the thousands of meals that had brought people together in this space. Thank you, I whispered to the empty room, to Robert's ghost, to the years themselves. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, custody hearings, Emily's continued attacks. But tonight had given me something she could never take, the knowledge that I'd built something that mattered, that would continue mattering long after the last Sullivan had left the building. The recipes would live on. The spirit would endure. And somewhere, maybe, the daughter I'd lost to greed might remember the mother who'd loved her before she'd decided love was less valuable than money. But I wasn't counting on it anymore. I had Danny and Sophie to raise, a new life to build at 75, and the hard-won knowledge that family isn't about blood or money. It's about showing up, serving others, and choosing love even when it costs everything. The call from Martha came at 6 in the morning, 3 days after I'd officially handed over Sullivan's kitchen to Carlos and Maria. Danny and Sophie were still asleep in their rooms, Emily's old room and the guest room that had become their sanctuaries from their parents' chaos. "Margaret, you need to come to my office immediately. Bring the children's birth certificates and any financial documents related to Emily's trust fund." "What trust fund?" I asked, confused. There was never. "Just come." "And Margaret?" "Bring a witness, someone unrelated to the family." I called Carmen, who arrived within minutes, her face creased with concern. We left a note for the children and drove to Martha's office in tense silence. Martha's conference room was full. Patricia Walsh had returned from her mysteriously canceled vacation. 2 FBI agents sat at the far end, and a woman I didn't recognize occupied the seat across from Martha. "Mrs. Sullivan," the stranger said, standing. "I'm Diane Foster from the Federal Treasury Department, Financial Crimes Division. We need to discuss your late husband's estate." My legs felt weak. Carmen guided me to a chair. "Robert's estate was settled 35 years ago," I said carefully. Everything was straightforward. "Actually, it wasn't." Diane pulled out a thick folder. "Your husband had a life insurance policy you didn't know about. A policy that matured into a trust fund worth approximately $12 million. The room spun. $12 million. That was impossible. The policy was purchased through his military service," Diane continued. Payments were automatically deducted, so small you probably never noticed. The beneficiary was supposed to be you, with Emily as secondary beneficiary upon your death. Supposed to be? Carmen asked, her hand gripping mine. Martha took over, her voice grim. Emily found out about this trust 5 years ago when she hired a forensic accountant to investigate your finances, looking for hidden assets. But instead of telling you, she's been systematically draining it. I couldn't breathe. Carmen was saying something, but all I could hear was static. She forged your signature, Patricia Walsh explained, sliding documents across the table. Created fake medical bills, false investment accounts, phantom debts. She's stolen approximately $8 million over 5 years. $8 million. While I'd been mortgaging everything to help her, while I'd been eating beans to pay for her children's school, she'd been stealing a fortune I didn't even know existed. But she kept asking for money, I whispered. Why would she? Greed, the FBI agent said simply, and to maintain the illusion, if she'd suddenly stopped needing help, you might have investigated. By keeping you financially stressed, constantly giving her money, you never thought to look deeper. Martha handed me a tissue. I hadn't realized I was crying. There's more, she said gently. The private investigator Emily hired? He also discovered that Robert had purchased the building next to Sullivan's kitchen. It's been sitting in a trust, collecting rent for 35 years. That trust is worth another $3 million. $3 million. A building I walked past every day, never knowing Robert had bought it for our future expansion, an expansion that never came because he died too soon. Emily has been collecting that rent through a shell company, Diane Foster added, depositing it into accounts in the Cayman Islands. My daughter. I couldn't finish. My daughter was more than a thief. She was a criminal mastermind who'd spent years orchestrating my financial and emotional destruction while pretending to need my help. Why are you telling me this now? Carmen asked, practical as always. Because David Whitman made a deal, Patricia said. Full cooperation in exchange for immunity from prosecution. He's provided everything. Recordings, emails, bank records. Emily was planning to have Margaret declared incompetent not just for the restaurant, but to gain control of these hidden assets. She knew I'd never agree to institutionalization if I wasn't desperate, I said, understanding flooding through me. So she kept me desperate. Exactly. The FBI agent leaned forward. Mrs. Sullivan, Emily is facing federal charges for wire fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, and money laundering. With David's testimony and the evidence we've gathered, she's looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison. 20 to 30 years. My daughter would be in her 70s when she got out, older than I was when she'd tried to throw me away. The children. I started. We'll need to be told, Martha said firmly. But first, we need to secure the remaining assets. There's still $4 million in the original trust, and the building is yours, free and clear. $4 million, plus the building, plus the $800,000 from the restaurant sale. After years of poverty, sacrifice, and struggle, I was wealthy. Actually wealthy at 75. Mrs. Sullivan? A new voice from the doorway. Danny stood there, Sophie behind him, both in their school uniforms. We heard you leave. Is everything okay? How do you tell children their mother is a monster? How do you explain that the grandmother they'd watched struggle was actually rich, but their mother had stolen it all? Come here, I said, opening my arms. They rushed to me, sensing the gravity in the room. Patricia Walsh, veteran prosecutor and mother herself, knelt to their level. Your mom has done some very bad things. Not to you, but to your grandmother. She's going to have to go away for a long time. Prison? Sophie asked in a small voice. Yes. Danny's face hardened in a way no 9-year-old should. Good. She deserves it. Danny. No, Grandma, she hurt you. She stole from you. She tried to put you in a home so she could take everything. She deserves worse than prison. The anger in his young voice was terrible to hear, but beneath it was something else, relief. Relief that Emily would face consequences, that justice existed, that doing bad things had a price. There's something else, Martha said carefully. With this money, Margaret, you're now one of the wealthiest women in Boston. The children's education is secured through graduate school. You can live anywhere, do anything. Can we stay with Grandma? Sophie asked immediately. The custody hearing is next week, Patricia said. But with both parents unable to care for you, your father in rehabilitation, your mother facing federal charges, and Margaret's clear financial stability, I can't imagine any judge refusing. As the meeting continued, detailing financial recoveries and legal procedures, I found myself thinking about Robert. He'd protected me even in death, creating safety nets I never knew existed. But Emily had found them first, turned them into her personal treasure chest while watching me struggle. Mrs. Sullivan, the FBI agent said, Emily is requesting to see you. She's being held pending bail hearing, but she's asked specifically, no. The word came out harder than I intended. She's had years to talk to me honestly. Every conversation was a manipulation. I'm done. She says she has something important to tell you about Robert. Another lie. I stood, gathering Danny and Sophie. Whatever she claims to know, whatever dramatic revelation she's concocted, I'm not interested. She's stolen enough from me, money, trust, years of my life. She doesn't get to steal any more of my time. As we left Martha's office, Carmen driving us home, the children quiet in the back seat, I thought about the irony of it all. Emily had been right about one thing: everything would be hers someday. But her greed couldn't wait for someday. She'd wanted it now, and in grabbing for it had lost it all. Grandma? Danny said quietly. Are we rich now? We have enough, I answered carefully. Enough to be safe, to be comfortable, to help others. Can we still go to Sullivan's kitchen? Every day if you want. Can Carlos and Maria keep it? Of course. That was real, not one of your mother's schemes. Sophie leaned forward. Can we use the money to help people, like you did with the restaurant? My eyes filled with tears again, but these were different tears of hope. Despite everything they'd witnessed, these children had learned the right lessons. They understood that money was a tool, not a goal. Yes, I said. We'll use it to help people. We'll use it to do good. We'll use it the way your grandfather would have wanted to make life better for others, not just ourselves. The opposite of what Mom did, Danny said flatly. The opposite of what she did, I agreed. That afternoon I called Carlos and Maria, told them about the building next door. It's yours, I said, for expansion, for storage, whatever you need. Robert would have wanted Sullivan's kitchen to grow. They cried, protested it was too much, but I insisted. Real family shares good fortune. Real family builds each other up instead of tearing each other down. As evening fell, I sat with Danny and Sophie at our kitchen table, the modest kitchen of my modest home that had witnessed so much pain and betrayal. Tomorrow, we could move anywhere, buy anything, live however we chose. Should we get a bigger house? Sophie asked. Do we need one? I replied. She thought about it. No, this feels like home. Home. Not because of its size or value, but because of who lived there and how they loved each other. Emily had never understood that. She'd seen only square footage and property values, never the laughter and tears that made a house precious. She'd stolen millions but lived in emotional poverty. We'd had nothing but possessed everything that mattered. The Federal Detention Center in Boston was a gray monument to consequences, its walls holding those who'd gambled with the law and lost. I sat in the visitor's room, my hands folded on the metal table, watching the door through which Emily would enter. I'd sworn I wouldn't come, but Patricia Walsh had called that morning with information I couldn't ignore. She's been talking, Patricia had said, about things from Robert's death, things that might explain everything. So here I sat, 75 years old, about to face the daughter who'd orchestrated my financial and emotional destruction with the precision of a surgeon. The door opened. Emily shuffled in, orange jumpsuit hanging on her frame, her usually perfect hair limp and unwashed. The designer daughter I'd known was gone, replaced by federal inmate number 47,832B. She sat across from me, her eyes, Robert's eyes, meeting mine for the first time without calculation or pretense. Prison had stripped away her masks, leaving something raw and ugly, and perhaps finally honest. Hello, Mother. Emily. Silence stretched between us, 35 years of lies condensing into this moment. You came, she said finally. Patricia Walsh said you had information about Robert's death. Emily laughed, bitter and sharp. Information, that's one word for it. She leaned forward, and I could smell the industrial soap, the desperation, the defeat. Did you know Dad was having an affair? The words hit like ice water. That's a lie. with his business partner's wife, Karen Mitchell. I saw them together when I was 12. The day before he died, my chest tightened. Tom Mitchell had been Robert's best friend, his partner in the restaurant's early days before Tom had moved to California. Karen had been beautiful, kind, always asking about Emily. "You're lying," I repeated, but my voice wavered. "I followed him," Emily continued, her voice flat, emotionless. "I was supposed to be at school, but I'd been suspended for fighting something you never knew because the school called Dad, not you. I saw him meet her at the Marriott downtown. Saw them kiss. Saw them go upstairs." The room spun slightly. Robert, my Robert, who'd sworn I was his everything. "I confronted him that night," Emily said. "After you went to bed, told him I'd seen everything. He begged me not to tell you. Said it was ending, that Karen was moving to California with Tom, that it meant nothing. Stop. He promised me things," she pressed on relentlessly. "Said he'd make it up to me. The life insurance policy, the building next door, he bought those the next day. For me," he said, "to secure my future since he'd failed my present." "The next day he had a heart attack," I whispered. "The stress," Emily said simply. A 12-year-old girl holding his secret, threatening to destroy his marriage. His heart couldn't take it. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against concrete. "You're saying you killed him?" "I'm saying I've been carrying his guilt for 35 years. Emily's voice cracked for the first time. "Every time you talked about him like he was perfect. Every time you sacrificed for his memory. Every time you chose his ghost over my reality. I died a little more inside. So you decided to rob me?" "I decided to take what he'd left for me, what he'd promised me in exchange for my silence." She laughed bitterly. "Except the guilt ate me alive anyway. Do you know what it's like, Mother? Watching you worship a man who betrayed you? Watching you struggle for a lie? So you became the lie instead?" My voice was stronger now, anger overtaking shock. "You became the betrayer?" "I became what he made me," Emily shot back. "A keeper of secrets, a person who saw love as transaction. He bought my silence with promises. I learned that everything has a price. Danny and Sophie. We're supposed to be different." For the first time, real emotion flickered across Emily's face. I was going to be different with them. But then I realized I was looking at them the way Dad looked at me, as problems to manage, expenses to calculate, little witnesses to buy off. The truth of generational damage sat between us like a physical presence. "The money you stole was mine anyway," in my mind. Payment for 35 years of keeping his secret. Payment for losing my innocence at 12. Payment for watching you love a ghost more than you loved me. I loved you. You loved who you thought I was. Emily slammed her hand on the table. The daughter of perfect Robert and devoted Margaret. But I was the daughter of a cheater and a woman too blind to see it. Every time you chose the restaurant over me, every time you worked late instead of coming to my recitals, you were choosing his dream over my reality. So you decided to destroy me? I decided to take what was mine and leave. The plan was simple. Get the money, get out, start fresh somewhere you and his ghost couldn't follow. She slumped back. But it was never enough. $8 million, and I still felt empty. Still felt 12 years old. Watching my father beg me not to destroy his reputation. Did David know? David knew I was damaged goods from day one. He had his own demons, the gambling, the debts to people who break kneecaps. We were perfect for each other, two broken people breaking everything we touched. "The children don't have to be broken," I said firmly. "They can end this cycle." "Can they?" Emily looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed ancient. They've watched their parents destroy each other and their grandmother. They've learned that love is conditional, that family is transactional, that trust is foolish. They've learned that actions have consequences, that choosing greed over love leads to prison, that their grandmother will fight for them even when their parents won't. Emily was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she pulled out a folded paper from her jumpsuit pocket. "I wrote this last night. It's everything: account numbers, passwords, location of documents. There's another $2 million in cryptocurrency I hid. It's all there." I took the paper with trembling hands. "Why?" "Because I'm going to be here for 20 years minimum. Because my children deserve better than what I became. Because maybe, just maybe, if I do one right thing, the 12-year-old girl who kept her father's secret can finally rest." She stood to leave. then turned back. Mom, I did love you once. Before I knew what love cost. Before I learned that everyone has a price. I loved you when I was little, when you'd sing while you cooked, when you'd let me help in the kitchen even though I just made messes. I remember, I whispered. That little girl died with Dad. What grew in her place? I don't know what I became. But it wasn't your daughter. It was something else. Something hungry that could never be filled. Emily, take care of my children. Teach them what you tried to teach me before I stopped listening. Teach them that money isn't love, that greed isn't strength, that family isn't about what you can take but what you can give. She walked to the door, then paused. Was he worth it? The restaurant, the legacy, all of it? I thought about Robert, about the man I'd loved who'd apparently betrayed me, about the daughter I'd lost to his secrets, about the grandchildren I was fighting to save. He was human, I said finally. Flawed, imperfect, weak in ways I never knew. But the restaurant was never really about him. It was about feeding people, creating community, building something that mattered. That's what's worth it. Emily nodded once, then knocked for the guard. As the door closed behind her, I sat in the empty visitor's room, holding her confession, processing 35 years of lies layered upon lies. Robert had cheated. Emily had known. The weight of that secret had crushed her childhood, twisted her adulthood, and ultimately destroyed her life. But I had Danny and Sophie to think about now. 2 children who could still be saved, who could still learn that love doesn't require payment, that family isn't a business transaction, that some things matter more than money. I left the prison into brilliant October sunshine. Carmen was waiting in the car, her face anxious. How was it? Educational, I said, handing her Emily's confession. Call Martha. We have more money to recover and 2 children's futures to secure. And Emily? I looked back at the prison, thinking of the 12-year-old girl who'd carried her father's secret until it poisoned her entire life. Emily is where she needs to be, where she can't hurt anyone else, where maybe, finally, she can stop hurting herself. As we drove away, I thought about truth and its cost. Robert's lie had killed him and corrupted Emily. Emily's lies had nearly destroyed me. But the truth, brutal as it was, had set us all free in different ways. Tomorrow, I would tell Danny and Sophie an age-appropriate version of their history. They deserved to know why their mother had become what she was, but also that they weren't doomed to repeat her choices. The cycle could end with them. It would end with them. And I would make sure of it with every day I had left. The courtroom was packed for Emily's sentencing. 3 months had passed since her confession, 3 months during which federal investigators had uncovered the full extent of her crimes. The number had grown from 8 million to nearly 11 million when they found offshore accounts, fake charities, and a complex web of financial deception spanning 7 years. I sat in the front row with Martha beside me. Danny and Sophie had begged to come, but I'd refused. They didn't need to see their mother in shackles, didn't need that image burned into their memories alongside all the others. Emily entered in her orange jumpsuit, her lawyer beside her, a public defender now, since she couldn't afford private counsel. She looked smaller, older, her 48 years finally showing without designer clothes and expensive treatments to hide them. Judge Harrison, known for his harsh sentences in financial crimes, reviewed the charges with methodical precision. Wire fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, money laundering, tax evasion. Each charge carried years, and Emily faced them all. Before sentencing, the judge said, "I'll hear victim impact statements." I stood slowly, my prepared speech in my hand, but when I reached the podium, I set it aside. "Your Honor, Emily Whitman is my daughter, was my daughter. I don't know what she is now. For 7 years, while I mortgaged my home to help her, while I worked 18-hour days to support her family, she was stealing millions I didn't know existed. She watched me struggle, watched me sacrifice, and felt nothing but entitlement to more. I looked at Emily. She stared at the table, unable to meet my eyes. But the money isn't what she truly stole. She stole my faith in love. She stole my grandchildren's innocence. She stole their father's sobriety. He's relapsed twice since learning the extent of her deception. She stole years of my life I spent believing I was helping someone who loved me. My voice cracked, but I continued. She claims she was damaged by keeping her father's secret, and maybe that's true, but millions of children carry terrible secrets without becoming criminals. At some point, Your Honor, we choose who we become. Emily chose greed over love, deception over truth, theft over honest work. She chose to become someone who could watch her mother suffer while sitting on stolen millions. I returned to my seat. Other victims testified the fake charities she'd robbed, the investors she'd defrauded using my name, the employees at Sullivan's Kitchen she'd tried to bribe. Each story added weight to the truth. Emily had become a predator who happened to share my DNA. When Emily stood to speak, her voice was hollow. I won't insult anyone by asking for forgiveness. I won't pretend remorse I'm not sure I can feel. Something broke in me long ago, and I used that brokenness as an excuse to break others. I accept whatever sentence the court gives. It can't be worse than the prison I've already built for myself. Judge Harrison's expression was stone as he delivered the verdict. Emily Whitman, you targeted the most vulnerable victim possible, your elderly mother who loved and trusted you. You didn't steal out of need, but out of pathological greed. You caused immeasurable psychological and financial damage to multiple victims. I sentence you to 24 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years probation. You're ordered to pay full restitution, though the court recognizes you lack the means to do so. 24 years. Emily would be 72 when she got out, assuming good behavior, older than I'd been when she'd tried to destroy me. As they led her away, she looked back once. Our eyes met across the courtroom. Mother and daughter, strangers and enemies, bound by blood and broken by greed. She mouthed something, maybe I'm sorry, maybe goodbye, but I looked away. Some words come too late to matter. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Carmen and my lawyer friends formed a protective barrier, getting me to the car. As we drove away, I saw David in the parking lot, thinner, shaking, clearly using again. The destruction Emily had wrought extended far beyond financial crimes. That evening, I sat with Danny and Sophie for the conversation I dreaded. 24 years, Danny said flatly when I told them. She'll be old when she gets out. Yes. Good, Sophie said, surprising me with her vehemence. She hurt you, she hurt everyone. She's still your mother? No, Danny interrupted. She gave birth to us. That's biology. You're our mother. You're the one who loves us without price tags. At 9 years old, they understood what Emily never had the difference between biological connection and actual family. What happens to Dad? Sophie asked. I'd gotten the call that morning. David had been arrested trying to rob a liquor store, desperate for money to feed his relapsed gambling addiction. He'd likely serve time too, though less than Emily. Your dad is sick, I said carefully. He needs help. Maybe someday he'll get better. But not soon enough for us, Danny said. Not a question, but a statement of understood reality. No, probably not soon enough for you. They absorbed this with the resilience children shouldn't need, but sometimes develop when life demands it. That night, after they were asleep, I stood in my small kitchen making tea, the same kitchen where Emily had first demanded I move to a nursing home, where this nightmare had begun. Everything had changed since then. The restaurant was thriving under Carlos and Maria's management. The recovered millions were secured in trusts for the children's education and future. Emily and David were facing justice for their crimes. But I was still here, still standing, still making tea in my own kitchen. The phone rang. Patricia Walsh. Margaret, I wanted you to know we've frozen all of Emily's remaining assets. There's something else we found. More theft? No. Letters, hundreds of them, written to you but never sent, going back years. My chest tightened. What kind of letters? Apologies, confessions, some angry, some remorseful. It seems she wrote them when the guilt got too heavy, then kept them instead of sending them. Do you want them? Did I want to read my daughter's unsent confessions? Did I want to know what she'd felt during all those years of deception? Burn them, I said. Whatever she felt, she chose not to share it when it mattered. Those letters are just more manipulation, even if she only manipulated herself. After hanging up, I opened the window, letting October air fill the kitchen. Somewhere in federal prison, Emily was spending her first night of a 24-year sentence. Somewhere in another facility, David was detoxing again, his body and mind broken by addictions that had consumed everything. Somewhere in Boston, Carlos and Maria were closing Sullivan's Kitchen after another successful day, adding their own recipes to our family cookbook. And here in my kitchen, 2 children slept safely, finally free from the toxic love of parents who'd seen them as possessions rather than people. The truth about Robert's affair still stung. The perfect husband I'd mourned for 35 years had been flawed, human, weak. But that truth had also freed me from false worship, from measuring every decision against a ghost's imagined judgment. I pulled out paper and began writing. Dear Danny and Sophie, someday you'll be old enough to read this and understand fully what happened to our family. You'll wonder if your mother's greed lives in your blood, if your father's addictions wait in your genes, if you're destined to repeat their failures. You're not. Every morning, you choose who to become. Your mother chose wrong, day after day, year after year, until those choices became chains. But you've already chosen differently. You've chosen truth over lies, love over money, family over greed. Keep choosing, keep becoming, and know that no matter what you choose, I'll love you not for what you can give me, but for who you are. That's the only recipe that really matters. Love without price tags, family without conditions, truth without manipulation. Your grandmother, Margaret. I sealed the letter, to be given to them when they turned 18. By then I'd probably be gone, but the lessons would remain. The cycle of damaged parents creating damaged children would end with them. Emily had 24 years to figure out who she was without money to steal or people to manipulate. Maybe she'd find the little girl who'd loved me once. Maybe she'd only find emptiness. Either way, I was done waiting for her to become someone she'd chosen not to be. I had 2 children to raise, a community to serve, and whatever years remained to live without fear, without manipulation, without the constant drain of toxic love disguised as family obligation. The newspaper would run the story tomorrow. Boston restaurant matriarch's daughter sentenced to 24 years for elder fraud. The headlines would be brutal, the details embarrassing, the public judgment harsh. But tonight, in my small kitchen, with my grandchildren safe in their beds and my future finally my own, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The lawsuit arrived on a Tuesday morning in January, hand-delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as I signed for it. Emily, from federal prison, was suing for wrongful prosecution, emotional distress, and demanding custody of her children be restored upon her release. She can't be serious, Carmen said, reading over my shoulder as we stood in my doorway, winter wind cutting through our robes. But the 40-page document suggested otherwise. Emily had found a prisoner's rights attorney, someone who specialized in rectifying miscarriages of justice, and she was claiming I'd manipulated the system to steal her children and assets. Martha arrived within an hour, her face grim as she reviewed the filing. She's alleging elder self-abuse, Martha explained, claiming you deliberately impoverished yourself to frame her, that you coached the children to lie, that you conspired with Carlos and Maria to steal the restaurant through emotional manipulation. That's insane. That's strategy. She doesn't have to win, Margaret. She just has to create enough doubt to potentially reduce her sentence on appeal or gain some custody rights for when she's released. Danny and Sophie had been listening from the hallway. They entered the kitchen, their faces pale but determined. We won't go back to her, Danny said flatly. Ever. You might not have a choice, Martha said gently. If she wins even partial custody rights, then we'll run away, Sophie interrupted. We'll disappear before we let her near us again. The fear in their voices broke my heart. They'd been doing so well, therapy twice a week, good grades, friends at school. The nightmares had finally stopped. Now this. Nobody's running away, I said firmly. We're going to fight this properly, legally, and we're going to win. But as the weeks passed, Emily's campaign intensified. From prison, she was conducting interviews with sympathetic bloggers, painting herself as a devoted mother wrongfully separated from her children by a vindictive parent who'd never accepted her husband's death. She claimed the money she'd taken was rightfully hers, payment for years of emotional labor, caring for an increasingly senile mother. The story gained traction in certain circles. A prisoner's rights podcast featured her for an entire episode. A YouTube channel about false elder abuse accusations made her their cause célèbre. Comments sections filled with people who'd never met any of us but were convinced I was the real villain. Grandma, they're saying horrible things about you, Sophie said one evening, showing me her tablet before I could stop her. The comments were vicious. I was called everything from a kidnapper to a gold digger who'd murdered Robert for insurance money. People who'd never set foot in Sullivan's kitchen claimed I'd been serving rotten food for years. Someone had even started a petition to have Danny and Sophie return to Emily immediately. Turn it off, I said, pulling her into my arms. People who don't know the truth often shout the loudest lies. But the damage was spreading. Some regular customers stopped coming to Sullivan's kitchen, not wanting to be associated with the controversy. Carlos called, worried about negative reviews appearing online from people who'd never eaten there. Then David resurfaced. He'd been released from his 90-day stint in minimum security and immediately filed his own lawsuit, not against Emily but supporting her claims. His lawyer argued that both parents had been victims of my manipulation, that I'd deliberately driven a wedge between them to gain access to the children and their inheritance rights. "What inheritance rights?" I asked Martha incredulously. "Emily stole everything. There's nothing left but what I'm rebuilding." "The building next door that you gave to Carlos and Maria," Martha explained. "David's claiming that should have been held for the children, that you gave away their rightful inheritance." The irony was suffocating. The couple who'd stolen millions were now claiming I was the thief. The court date was set for March. In the meantime, a court-appointed child advocate named Dr. Sarah Brennan was assigned to evaluate the situation. Unlike the corrupt doctor, Patricia Downs, from Emily's previous attempt, Dr. Brennan had a reputation for thorough, unbiased assessments. She interviewed me first. 3 hours of careful questions about everything from my daily routine with the children to my feelings about Emily's imprisonment. "Mrs. Sullivan, Emily claims you poisoned her children against her. How do you respond?" "I told them the truth," I said simply. "That their mother committed crimes and had to face consequences. I've never told them to hate her. They reached that conclusion themselves." She also claims you're too old to properly care for 2 active children. "I'm 76. I walk 3 miles every morning with them. I help with homework every night. I attend every school event. Emily never did any of those things when she had them." Dr. Brennan interviewed the children separately, then together. She spoke with their teachers, their therapists, their friends' parents. She reviewed financial records, medical records, even report cards. If you find this part truly thought-provoking, go ahead and hit like to show your support. Do you feel the same way as the character in this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. 2 weeks before the hearing, she delivered her preliminary report to all parties. Martha read it to me over the phone. "The children are thriving in Mrs. Sullivan's care. They show no signs of coaching or manipulation. Their accounts of their parents' behavior are consistent with documented evidence. Both children have explicitly stated they feel unsafe with their biological parents and view their grandmother as their primary attachment figure. Recommend continued custody with Mrs. Sullivan." I should have felt relief, but Emily's response came within hours, a new filing claiming Dr. Brennan was biased, had been bribed, was romantically involved with Martha, completely false, and demanding a new evaluator. "She's desperate," Martha said. "This is what cornered criminals do, throw everything at the wall hoping something sticks." But something did stick, in the worst possible way. 3 days before the hearing, Danny disappeared. He'd left for school as usual, Sophie walking beside him, but never arrived. The school called at 9:30. By 10, police were searching. By noon, an Amber Alert had been issued. I was paralyzed with terror, sitting in my kitchen while police officers filled my home, Sophie crying in Carmen's arms. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. "Grandma?" Danny's voice, scared but trying to sound brave. "I'm okay. I'm with Dad." The room exploded into action, police tracing the call, but I barely heard them. "Danny, where are you?" "Dad says we're going on an adventure. He says if I come with him, he'll tell the judge you're a good grandma and should keep Sophie. But I have to stay with him for a while first. David had kidnapped his own son to use as a bargaining chip." "Danny, listen to me." The line went dead. For 6 hours we waited in agony. Then police found them at a motel in Rhode Island. David was high on something, barely coherent, with Danny locked in the bathroom for his own safety. The boy had managed to call 911 from David's phone while David was unconscious. When they brought Danny home, he ran into my arms and didn't let go for an hour. David was arrested for kidnapping, child endangerment, and violating his parole. The kidnapping changed everything. Emily's carefully crafted victim narrative collapsed when her co-conspirator was caught using their child as a hostage. The podcast deleted their episode. The YouTube channel issued a retraction. The petition disappeared. At the hearing, Emily appeared via video link from prison, her face drawn with rage, as the judge not only denied her lawsuit but terminated her parental rights entirely. "Mrs. Whitman, the judge said, his voice cold with disgust. You conspired with your husband to traumatize your children for legal gain. Your actions show a complete absence of maternal instinct or basic human decency. You are hereby permanently barred from any contact with your minor children. Emily screamed obscenities until they cut her feed. David, in custody awaiting trial for kidnapping, had his rights terminated in absentia. That night, as I tucked Danny and Sophie into bed, they were finally, legally mine. Not temporarily, not conditionally, but permanently. Grandma, Danny said sleepily. Are we safe now? Yes, sweetheart. No one can take you away again. Good, he murmured. Because this is where we belong. Sophie was already asleep, but she'd left a drawing on her nightstand, our family at Sullivan's kitchen, all of us together, with the real Sullivans written across the top in her careful printing. The legal battles weren't over. Emily would probably appeal from prison, file new lawsuits, continue her campaign of harassment. But she'd lost the only leverage she'd had, the threat of taking the children. They were safe. They were mine. And they were finally free to heal without looking over their shoulders, waiting for their biological parents to destroy their lives again. The letter from the bank arrived 6 months after the custody ruling, just as September painted Boston in shades of amber and gold. Danny and Sophie were at school. Thriving in their new stability, Danny had joined the robotics club. Sophie was starring in the fall play. I almost didn't open the official-looking envelope, assuming it was another statement for the trust funds I'd established. Instead, it was a notification that someone had attempted to access Robert's original military insurance policy, the one that had created the hidden millions Emily had stolen. The attempt had been blocked, but the bank wanted to verify security protocols. Who else would even know about that account? I asked Martha over the phone. That's what worries me. Emily's in federal prison with no computer access. David's in state custody awaiting trial. Who else knew? The answer came 3 days later in the form of Patricia Whitman, David's mother, the woman who'd successfully sued her own elderly parents for their estate years ago. She appeared at my door wearing designer clothes and a predatory smile that reminded me painfully of Emily at her worst. Margaret, she said, as though we were old friends. We need to talk about my grandchildren's future. I didn't invite her in, but she pushed past me anyway, surveying my modest home with calculating eyes. I've been reviewing the family finances, she continued, settling uninvited on my sofa. It seems there are substantial assets that should be held in trust for Daniel and Sophia. There are trusts, which you have no authority to access. Not yet. Her smile widened. But as their paternal grandmother, I have rights, especially given your advanced age and recent health issues. What health issues? The ones that will become apparent when my private investigator completes his report. Amazing what signs of dementia can be documented when someone's looking carefully enough. The threat was clear. She intended to follow Emily's playbook, but with more sophistication and resources. Get out of my house. Certainly, but Margaret, dear, you should know I've already filed for grandparents' rights. My son may be temporarily indisposed, but I'm a respectable member of society with substantial means. Courts look favorably on blood relatives who can provide stability. After she left, I called an emergency meeting with Martha, Patricia Walsh, and to my surprise, Jonathan Reed, who'd become an unexpected ally since his change of heart. Patricia Whitman is dangerous, Jonathan said bluntly. She destroyed her own parents, took everything they had. She taught Emily everything about financial manipulation. So Emily learned from the master, Martha mused. That explains the sophistication of her schemes. What does she really want? I asked. Control of the trusts, Patricia Walsh answered. If she gains even partial custody or guardianship rights, she can petition to be made financial trustee. She doesn't want the children, she wants their money. That evening, I sat Danny and Sophie down for another difficult conversation. Your other grandmother wants to meet you, I said carefully. Dad's mom? Danny's face hardened. The one who stole from her parents? How do you know about that? Dad told me during the kidnapping. He said she taught Mom everything about taking money from family. He said she was proud when Mom started stealing from you because it meant Emily was finally showing Whitman initiative. Sophie grabbed my hand. We don't want to meet her. You may not have a choice. She's filed for visitation rights. Then we'll tell the judge what Dad said, Danny declared. We'll tell everyone she's just like Mom but worse. The legal filing was more complex than Emily's crude attempts. Patricia had hired 3 law firms, assembled a team of experts, and created a narrative that painted her as the stable, wealthy grandmother trying to rescue children from an elderly woman too proud to admit she needed help. But Patricia had made one crucial error. She'd underestimated Jonathan Reed's connections. "I've known Patricia Whitman for 30 years, he told me during a strategy meeting. "She's left a trail of destroyed families and stolen inheritances. I know where the bodies are buried, so to speak." He produced a file thick with documentation, 7 elderly relatives Patricia had systematically stripped of assets, 2 business partners she'd defrauded, and most damning, recordings from her own children describing her methods. "My investigators found her daughter," Jonathan explained, "Rebecca Whitman, living under an assumed name in Seattle. She's willing to testify about her mother's patterns." Rebecca arrived the week before the hearing, a woman in her 50s who looked haunted by decades of damage. "Mother doesn't want those children," she told the court. "She wants what they represent: access to money. She did the same with me, used me to get to my trust fund from my grandparents, then discarded me when the money ran out." "How did she train Emily?" the judge asked. Emily was her prize student. Mother would bring her to family gatherings and teach her to identify vulnerable relatives with assets. She called it wealth mapping. Emily learned to see family as investment opportunities. Patricia's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. When Patricia herself took the stand, her composure cracked under cross-examination. "Mrs. Whitman," Martha asked, "how many times have you met your grandchildren?" "Well, I've been busy." 0 times in 9 years, correct? You've never sent a birthday card, never attended a school event, never called them? I was respecting boundaries. You didn't know their names until you researched their trust funds, did you? Patricia's silence was damning. Then Danny asked to speak. The judge was reluctant, but Danny insisted with a maturity beyond his 9 years. "Your Honor," he said, his voice clear and strong, "Patricia Whitman isn't our grandmother. She's just someone who wants our money. Our real grandmother is Margaret Sullivan, who feeds people even when she can't afford to, who stayed up all night when we had nightmares, who sold everything to take care of us. Patricia Whitman only showed up when she found out about the trusts. That tells you everything." Sophie stood beside her brother. "We choose Grandma Margaret. Blood doesn't make family, love does." The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Patricia Whitman was denied any custodial or visitation rights. Moreover, he issued a restraining order preventing her from contacting the children or attempting to access their financial information. "Mrs. Whitman," the judge said sternly, "your history of elder financial abuse is well documented. Your attempt to use these children to access their trusts is transparent and reprehensible. Any further attempts will result in criminal charges." Patricia left the courtroom in fury, but not before locking eyes with me. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Those children carry my son's name, my blood." "They carry something more important," I interrupted. "They carry the knowledge of right and wrong, something neither you nor Emily ever learned." That night, we celebrated at Sullivan's kitchen. Carlos and Maria had prepared a feast, and the entire restaurant family gathered around us. Danny and Sophie were passed from embrace to embrace, surrounded by people who loved them without calculating their worth in dollars. "Grandma," Sophie asked later, as I tucked her in, "why do some people only see money when they look at family?" I thought about Robert's hidden betrayal, Emily's devastating greed, David's desperate schemes, Patricia's predatory calculations. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe they're so empty inside that they think money can fill the void, but it never does. It just makes the emptiness echo louder." "We're not empty," Danny said from his doorway. "No," I agreed, pulling him into the hug. "We're full of everything that matters." The trust funds would remain protected, growing quietly until the children turned 25. Jonathan Reed had helped structure them with so many safeguards that no one, not Emily from prison, not Patricia with her schemes, not any future predator could touch them. But more importantly, Danny and Sophie were learning that their true inheritance wasn't money. It was the ability to love without price tags, to give without calculating returns, to see people as humans rather than opportunities. They were breaking the Whitman curse, one genuine moment at a time. The cottage in Provincetown was smaller than I'd imagined when I first saw it in the real estate listing, just 3 bedrooms, a kitchen that reminded me of Sullivan's early days, and a view of Cape Cod Bay that stretched forever. But standing here now with Danny and Sophie, 18 months after Patricia Whitman's failed attempt to steal them, it felt like a palace of peace. "Grandma, look." Sophie called from the small garden, where she discovered a patch of wild herbs growing despite the sandy soil. "Can we use these for cooking?" At 11 now, she'd developed my love for the kitchen, spending hours experimenting with recipes, combining her heritage Irish from me, Mexican flavors learned from Maria, and her own creative innovations. Danny, also 11, was at the weathered picnic table, dismantling an old radio he'd found in the garage. His mechanical mind never rested, always figuring out how things worked, how they could be improved. MIT had already sent recruitment materials after his science fair project went viral, a water purification system made from restaurant waste materials. "We can transplant them to better soil," I told Sophie, joining her in the garden. "Make them thrive instead of just survive." Like us, I thought but didn't say. The morning mail brought the usual mix bills, catalogs, and a letter forwarded from Boston with familiar handwriting. Emily had been transferred to minimum security after 3 years of good behavior. This was her 5th letter this month. I didn't open it. Instead, I added it to the box in the closet, with the others all unopened, all unwanted. The children didn't know about them, and I intended to keep it that way until they were older, strong enough to decide for themselves whether their mother's words deserved their attention. "Mrs. Sullivan?" A voice called from the front gate. Jennifer Martinez from the Globe stood there, not with a recorder this time, but with a small gift bag. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Jennifer, come in. What brings you to the Cape?" A follow-up story, actually, but not about the trial or the crimes. About what comes after, how a family rebuilds from deliberate destruction. We sat on the porch while the children played on the beach below, their laughter carrying on the salt wind. "It's been 2 years since Emily's sentencing," Jennifer said carefully. "How do you heal from that kind of betrayal?" I watched Danny help Sophie build an elaborate sandcastle, complete with moats and fortifications protecting something precious from imaginary threats. "You don't heal, exactly," I said finally. "You scar. And scar tissue is stronger than regular skin, but it's also less flexible. I love more carefully now, but also more deliberately. I trust less easily, but when I do trust, it's based on actions, not words or blood relations." The children seem remarkably well adjusted. They have good days and bad days. Sophie still has nightmares about being taken away. Danny sometimes stares at nothing, and I know he's remembering the kidnapping. But they also laugh genuinely, love freely, and most importantly, they understand that their parents' failures don't define their futures. What about Sullivan's Kitchen? Thriving under Carlos and Maria. They've opened 2 more locations, employed 50 people from immigrant communities. The original location still has Margaret's table permanently reserved for us whenever we visit Boston. And you? How do you fill your days? I smiled, gesturing toward the small studio I'd built beside the cottage. I'm writing a cookbook. Not just recipes, but stories. The real cost of each dish not in dollars but in sacrifice, love, and sometimes survival. Publishers are interested, but I'm taking my time. These stories deserve careful telling. Jennifer pulled out the gift bag, revealing a framed photo I hadn't seen before, Robert and me at Sullivan's opening day, young and fearless, unaware of what lay ahead. "I found this in the Globe's archives," she said. "Thought you should have it." I studied our younger selves, Robert's arm around me, both of us grinning at possibilities that seemed endless. I now knew about his affair, his weakness, his humanity. But I also knew about his love, imperfect as it was, and the good that had come from our union despite the pain. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. The children should see this, understand that people are complex, that someone can be both good and flawed. After Jennifer left, I found Danny at the tide pools, studying the small ecosystems with scientific intensity. "Grandma," he said without looking up, "do you think people can change? Really change?" I knew he was thinking about his parents, about the letters I didn't know he knew about the possibility that somewhere in federal prison, Emily might be becoming someone different. "People can change," I said carefully, "but change requires acknowledging harm, making amends, And most importantly, not expecting forgiveness. Your mother might become a different person in prison, but that doesn't erase who she was or what she did. Dad's getting out next year, he said quietly. His lawyer sent a letter. I hadn't told him that, hadn't wanted to burden him with that knowledge yet. How do you know? I intercepted it. I've been checking the mail before you wake up. He finally looked at me, his eyes Emily's eyes, Robert's eyes filled with premature wisdom. I don't want him to find us. He won't. The restraining order. Pieces of paper didn't stop him from kidnapping me. The truth of that sat between us like a cold stone. Then we'll be ready, I said firmly. We have security systems now, panic buttons, neighbors who watch out for us. We're not vulnerable like before. We'll never be safe, will we? Not really. There's always another relative wanting money, another scheme, another betrayal waiting. I pulled him close. This boy forced to grow up too fast, forced to see the worst of human nature in those who should have protected him. Safety is relative, I admitted. But strength? That's absolute. And you, Daniel Sullivan, because that's who you choose to be, not Daniel Whitman. You have strength your parents never dreamed of. You have integrity they couldn't buy, courage they couldn't steal, and love they couldn't corrupt. That evening, as I prepared dinner in our small kitchen, Sophie and Danny worked beside me, comfortable with knives and flames, understanding that creation and danger often stood side by side. We made Robert's brown bread, but added Patricia's herbs from the garden, and Maria's spice techniques, a fusion of everything we'd learned, honoring the good while acknowledging the bad. Grandma, Sophie said, kneading dough with practiced hands, I want to open a restaurant someday, but different from Sullivan's. Something that helps people who can't afford food, but with dignity, not charity. A social enterprise, Danny added. I could design systems to reduce waste, maximize nutrition per dollar. We could feed more people with less resources. They were already planning their futures, already seeing beyond the trauma of their past to possibilities I couldn't have imagined. They would take the best of the Sullivan legacy, the service, the community, the love, expressed through food, and leave behind the worst of the Whitman heritage, the greed, the manipulation, the hollow pursuit of wealth. As we sat down to dinner, the sun setting over the bay in spectacular shades of orange and pink, I realized something profound. Emily and David had tried to steal everything from me: money, dignity, peace, even my life's work. But in their cruelty, they'd inadvertently given me something precious. These two remarkable children who were choosing to become everything their parents weren't. The cottage was small, the bank accounts were modest compared to the stolen millions, and the future remained uncertain with David's impending release and Emily's eventual return to society. But sitting at this simple table with Danny and Sophie, sharing food we'd made with our own hands, I was wealthier than I'd ever been. Tomorrow, Carlos and Maria are visiting, I announced. They want to teach you their grandmother's tamale recipe, the one that won the Boston Food Festival last year. The secret one? Sophie asked excitedly. The very same. They say you're ready to be trusted with it. Trust. Such a fragile thing, so easily shattered, so difficult to rebuild. But here in our cottage by the sea, we were constructing it daily, brick by brick, recipe by recipe, choice by careful choice. The Whitman curse would end with Danny and Sophie. They would be the generation that chose love over money, service over schemes, truth over manipulation. They were already becoming the people their parents could never be, and I would spend whatever years I had left making sure they had every tool, every opportunity, every ounce of love they needed to succeed. If this part really struck a chord with you, tap that like button to let me know you're with me. Do you see yourself in the character's journey? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I can't wait to hear your take. The call came at dawn on a Tuesday in March, just as the Cape Cod winter was finally releasing its grip. Danny answered it before I could reach the phone. He'd developed a habit of screening all calls since learning about his father's impending release. "Grandma," he said, his face pale, "it's Mr. Weber from the prosecutor's office." I took the phone with trembling hands. "Mrs. Sullivan?" David Whitman was released on parole yesterday. He's required to stay in Boston, maintain employment, and respect all restraining orders. But I wanted you to know immediately. Does he know where we are? Your address is protected. But... Weber hesitated. He's hired a private investigator. A legitimate one. Supposedly to locate Emily's hidden assets for restitution to you. But he's really looking for us. Stay vigilant. Any violation, any attempt at contact, call immediately. After hanging up, I found Danny and Sophie in the kitchen, both pretending to eat breakfast but really listening to every word. "He's out," Danny stated rather than asked. "Yes, but he can't come here, can't contact us. The restraining order." "Mom had a restraining order too," Sophie interrupted, her voice sharp with fear. "Didn't stop her from sending letters, hiring lawyers, trying to steal us back. They were right to be afraid." David might be weak compared to Emily's calculated evil, but desperate weak men could be just as dangerous as strategic predators. "We're not running," I said firmly. "This is our home. We've built a life here. We won't let fear drive us away." But I installed new locks that afternoon, upgraded the security system, and gave both children GPS trackers disguised as watches. Paranoid, perhaps, but their safety was worth any amount of caution. 3 weeks passed quietly. The children slowly relaxed, returning to their routine school, Sophie's drama club, Danny's robotics team. I almost believed David had accepted his boundaries. Then Carlos called from Sullivan's kitchen. "Mrs. Sullivan, you need to know David Whitman came here today. He didn't violate anything technically, just sat at the bar for 3 hours, asking questions about you, about the children." James refused to serve him, but he wouldn't leave until Carlos threatened to call the police. "What did he want?" "He kept saying he's changed, that prison and rehab gave him clarity. He wants to make amends but doesn't know how to reach you." "Margaret," he looked. "Broken. Not dangerous, just hollow." That evening, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was Danny's old teddy bear, the one he'd left behind during the kidnapping, the one police never recovered from the motel room. With it was a note in David's shaky handwriting. "I kept this to remember my son. Now I'm returning it because I realize I never knew him at all. I won't contact you directly, I know I've lost that right. But please know, I'm getting help. Real help. Not for custody or money or manipulation. For myself. Because I want to be someone my children don't have to fear. Even if they never speak to me again, I want to exist in the world as someone who doesn't cause them harm. D." Danny held the bear Mr. Buttons, he'd called it with tears streaming down his face. "I thought I'd lost him forever," he whispered. "During the kidnapping, when Dad was so high he didn't recognize me, Mr. Buttons was the only familiar thing. I held him while locked in that bathroom, pretending he could protect me." Sophie hugged her brother while I read and reread the note, looking for manipulation, for angles, for the con. But sometimes, perhaps, broken people actually broke through to truth. "He's trying to manipulate us," Sophie said firmly, "just like Mom did. Playing victim, pretending to change." "Maybe," I agreed. "Or maybe prison and losing everything actually taught him something. Emily never learned that actions have consequences and change requires acknowledging harm." "You're defending him?" Danny asked, incredulous. "No, I'm recognizing that people aren't static. Your mother chose to double down on her greed. Your father might be choosing differently. That doesn't mean we forgive or forget or allow him back into our lives. It just means we acknowledge that redemption is possible, even if reconciliation isn't." Martha called the next morning with unexpected news. David's been working at a homeless shelter, the one Sullivan's kitchen donates to. Volunteering first, now employed as a counselor. Father Anthony says he's been reliable, humble, genuinely committed to helping others with addiction. It's been 3 weeks. Actually, he started volunteering while still in minimum security. Weekend releases for community service. Father Anthony didn't know who he was until yesterday, says David never mentioned you or the children, never tried to leverage the connection. That gave me pause. Emily would have immediately used any connection to manipulate sympathy or access. David's silence suggested either deep strategy or actual shame. "There's more," Martha continued. "He's been attending survivors of abuse meetings, but as an abuser working on accountability, not as a victim. The facilitator contacted me, wanted to know if sharing his story there violated the restraining order. It doesn't, he never uses your names, just talks about the harm he caused his family through addiction and complicity in financial abuse. That afternoon, while the children were at school, I did something I'd sworn I wouldn't. I drove to Boston. Not to see David, but to understand what he was becoming. The homeless shelter was in Roxbury, a neighborhood that had seen better days but was fighting toward better ones again. Through the window, I watched David serving lunch, his expensive suits replaced with secondhand clothes, His entitled attitude seemingly vanished. He looked older, grayer, diminished but somehow more real than the pompous man who'd stood in my kitchen demanding I move to a nursing home. "Mrs. Sullivan?" I turned to find Father Anthony beside me. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said gently. "Carlos mentioned you might." I needed to see for myself. "What do you see?" I watched David kneel to help an elderly man with his oxygen tank, patient and careful, no cameras watching, no one to impress. "I see someone I don't recognize," I admitted. The David I knew would never touch someone poor, let alone serve them. "Suffering can be a teacher if we let it," Father Anthony said. "Some people, like your daughter, use suffering to justify causing more suffering. Others let it crack them open to empathy. David seems to be the latter. It doesn't undo what he did. No, but perhaps it prevents him from doing worse. Perhaps it even eventually leads to some small good in the world." I left without David seeing me, but I carried the image home, the man who'd helped steal millions genuinely serving those with nothing. That night I told the children what I'd seen, showed them photos Father Anthony had shared of David's work at the shelter. "He's still our father," Danny said quietly. "Biologically." "That will never change," I agreed. "But what kind of father he becomes from here, that's still being written." "I don't want him in our lives," Sophie said firmly. "Ever. And that's your choice. Both of yours. The restraining order stands as long as you want it. But I wanted you to know that people can change, even people who've done terrible things. It doesn't obligate you to forgive or forget. It just means the world isn't divided into permanent heroes and villains." "Like Mom?" Danny asked. "Could she change too?" I thought about the unopened letters piling up, Emily's voice trapped in envelopes I couldn't bring myself to read or throw away. "Anyone can change," I said carefully. "But change requires humility, and your mother built her entire identity on pride. Your father lost everything and found himself empty enough to fill with something new. Your mother lost everything and is still convinced she was right." We went to bed that night with David's note on the kitchen counter, neither enshrined nor discarded, just existing as evidence that even broken people could attempt repair. The next morning, there was an envelope under our door, no postmark, hand-delivered. Inside was a check for $5,000 made out to the Children's Trust, and a business card for David's employer at the shelter with a note, "He doesn't know I'm sending this. But he's been saving every penny beyond bare survival to somehow make restitution. This is his first payment. He asked me to find a way to get it to his children without violating the law. Father Anthony." Danny and Sophie stared at the check, not a fortune, but from a man working minimum wage at a shelter, it represented months of sacrifice. "What do we do with it?" Sophie asked. "Whatever you want," I said. "It's yours." They looked at each other, conducting one of those silent conversations twins perfect over time. "Give it to the shelter," Danny said finally. "For their food program. Don't tell him it's from us. Just let him see his money helping people who need it more than we do." In that moment, I saw Robert in them, not the flawed man who'd cheated, but the one who'd opened our doors during blizzards to feed strangers. They were choosing to be better than their biological parents while honoring the good that existed even in broken people. The invitation arrived on thick cream paper, Carlos's careful handwriting requesting our presence at Sullivan's kitchen for a special announcement. It had been 6 months since David's release, 3 months since we'd quietly donated his restitution money back to the shelter, and life had settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. "They're probably announcing another location," Sophie said, examining the invitation at our breakfast table. Maria mentioned they were looking at a space in Cambridge, but Danny shook his head, studying the date. October 15th. That's the anniversary of when Grandma signed the papers selling them the restaurant. He was right. 3 years to the day since I'd freed myself from 45 years of memories and launched into an uncertain future. We arrived at Sullivan's kitchen to find it transformed. Not physically, Carlos and Maria had kept their promise to preserve its character, but energetically. The dining room was packed with familiar faces. Our old staff, regular customers from decades past, Father Anthony, even Jonathan Reed in a corner table, quietly observing. "Mrs. Sullivan!" Maria rushed to embrace me, her third child baby Margaret balanced on her hip. "Thank you for coming." Carlos appeared from the kitchen, flour dusting his apron just as it had dusted Robert's all those years ago. "We have something to show you." They led us through the dining room to a wall that had been covered with a cloth. With theatrical flourish, Carlos pulled it away, revealing a bronze plaque. The Margaret Sullivan Foundation kitchen dedicated to feeding bodies and souls. No one turned away, everyone served with dignity, established 2024. Below it, a second plaque. In memory of Robert Sullivan, 1945 to 1990, who built these walls, and in honor of Margaret Sullivan, who filled them with love. My legs nearly gave out. Carmen caught my arm, steadying me as tears blurred my vision. "We've restructured the business," Maria explained. 30% of all profits now go to the foundation. Free meals for anyone in need, cooking classes for immigrant families, small business loans for food entrepreneurs from disadvantaged communities. The board of directors, Carlos added, pulling out a document, will be you, us, Carmen, James, and if they're willing when they turn 18, Danny and Sophie. Sophie gasped. Us? But we're only 11. You understand what this place means, Maria said simply. Not the money, but the mission. That matters more than age. As people applauded and photographers captured the moment Jennifer Martinez was there, of course, documenting our ongoing story, I noticed a figure in the kitchen doorway. Someone in chef's whites, face obscured by steam, watching but not entering. "Who's the new cook?" I asked Carlos. His expression grew careful. "Someone Father Anthony recommended. Been with us 2 months. Never misses a shift. Never complains. Works harder than anyone." The figure moved, and I caught a glimpse of profile. My blood went cold, then hot, then cold again. David. He saw me see him, and immediately retreated into the kitchen. Carlos touched my arm gently. "He doesn't know you'd be here today. We've been careful to schedule him when you're not visiting. Father Anthony says it's part of his recovery, honest work, serving others, being near what he helped destroy without trying to reclaim it. You hired my son-in-law who tried to destroy this place? We hired a broken man trying to rebuild," Maria said softly. "The same way you hired Carlos when he had nothing, the way you hired me when I was undocumented. Second chances, Mrs. Sullivan. Isn't that what this kitchen was always about?" I looked at Danny and Sophie, who'd also noticed their father. Danny's face was stone, but Sophie looked curious despite herself. "Did you know?" I asked them. "We found out last week," Danny admitted. "Carlos called, asked our permission, said they wouldn't hire him if we objected." "And?" "We said it was your kitchen's choice," Sophie said. "He can't hurt us from back there, and maybe seeing what he tried to destroy being used to help people will teach him something." Their maturity astounded me. At 11, they were showing more wisdom than their parents had shown at 40. The evening progressed with speeches, toasts, and memories shared. The new foundation had already served 5,000 free meals, funded 3 new food trucks for immigrant entrepreneurs, and established a culinary scholarship at the community college. Then Father Anthony stood, tapping his glass for attention. "I want to share something," he said. "Every morning at 5 a.m., before the shelter opens, someone comes to prepare breakfast for our guests. He pays for the ingredients himself, refuses recognition, and disappears before anyone can thank him. Last week, I finally caught him." He paused, and I knew what was coming. "David Whitman has been feeding the homeless with his own wages for 3 months. He told me, 'I spent years taking from those who had less. Now I need to give to those who have nothing.'" The room was silent. Danny's hands clenched into fists, Sophie bit her lip, and I felt the weight of impossible complexity. Could someone who'd done such harm genuinely transform? "I'm not asking for forgiveness or even understanding," Father Anthony continued. "I'm simply witness to the fact that people can change, even those we've written off as irredeemable." After the celebration, as guests dispersed and staff cleaned up, I found myself walking toward the kitchen. Not seeking David, but needing to see the space where I'd spent so many years, where Robert had died working the lunch rush, where Emily had learned to cook before she learned to steal. David was at the dish station, up to his elbows in soapy water. He looked up when I entered, then immediately backed down. "I'll leave," he said quickly. "I know the restraining order." "You're working." "I'm visiting. Neither of us is violating anything." We stood in awkward silence, the ghost of our past confrontations hanging between us. "The children donated your restitution money to the shelter," I said finally. His hands stilled in the water. "That sounds like them. Too good for their own good. They learned that from somewhere. Not from me or Emily." His voice was bitter with self-awareness. "We taught them suspicion, fear, The price of trusting the wrong people. And yet they're choosing trust anyway. Selective trust. Careful trust. But trust nonetheless. David finally looked at me fully. Prison and poverty had aged him 20 years. The arrogant tech executive was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned what bottom looked like. "I dream about that motel room," he said quietly. Danny locked in the bathroom, terrified of me, his own father. I was so high I thought he was an intruder, my own son, and I didn't recognize him. He remembers too. I know, that's my punishment. Not prison, not poverty, but knowing my children's memories of me will always include fear. Memories can be overwritten, I said carefully. Not erased, but layered with new ones. If you keep showing up, keep serving, keep choosing others over yourself, maybe someday they'll remember that too. I don't deserve that hope. No, I agreed. But they deserve a father trying to earn it, even if he never receives it. Sophie appeared in the doorway, Danny behind her. They'd been listening, of course they had. "We want to see the kitchen," Sophie announced, not looking at David. "Grandma, will you show us where you used to make the brown bread?" I understood. They were ready to exist in the same space as their father, not forgive or forget, but simply occupy the same air without fear. For the next hour, I taught them Robert's bread recipe while David silently washed dishes 10 feet away. No one spoke to him, but no one fled from him either. It was a start not of reconciliation, but of coexistence. As we prepared to leave, Danny paused at the kitchen door. "The bread you're making for the shelter," he said to David's back. "Use less salt. Homeless people often have high blood pressure from stress. They need nutrition, not more sodium." David nodded without turning. "I'll remember that." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. It was barely acknowledgement. But it was Danny choosing to share knowledge that would help others, even through someone who'd hurt him. Walking to our car, Sophie took my hand. "Are we bad people for not hating him?" "No, sweetheart. Hate takes energy better spent on love. We don't have to forgive him, but we don't have to carry hatred either. We can just let him exist in his corner of the world while we thrive in ours. And if he keeps getting better, then the world has one less broken person causing harm. That's always a good thing, even if it doesn't repair the harm already done." That night, I opened one of Emily's letters for the first time in months. Same demands, same manipulation, same refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing. I sealed it back up, returned it to the box. David was choosing change. Emily was choosing denial. Both were teaching my grandchildren lessons about consequences and choices. The Sullivan Foundation would thrive. Danny and Sophie would grow into remarkable adults. And somewhere in Boston, two broken people who'd created them would live with the consequences of their choices, one in a federal cell denying reality, the other in a kitchen trying to rebuild his soul one dish at a time. 7 years had passed, like pages turning in a book, some chapters peaceful, others marked by small storms, but all leading to this moment. Danny and Sophie stood in caps and gowns on the Provincetown High School football field, 18 years old and ready to launch into futures they'd earned through resilience rather than inheritance. Margaret Sullivan, grandmother and guardian of Daniel and Sophia Sullivan, the principal announced, and I stood to accept the special recognition they'd arranged. 7 years of PTA meetings, science fairs, drama productions, late-night homework help, college applications, all condensed into this moment of bittersweet triumph. Danny would be heading to MIT in the fall, full scholarship, to study sustainable engineering. Sophie had chosen Boston University's theater program, but with a double major in social entrepreneurship. They'd both legally changed their last names to Sullivan at 16, shedding the Whitman legacy like old skin. After the ceremony, as families gathered for pictures, a figure stood at the fence line. David, grayer now, worn down to something essential. He didn't approach, didn't violate the restraining order that would expire at midnight when the twins turned 18. He just watched his children graduate from a distance, then left quietly. "I saw him," Danny said later at our celebration dinner. "He didn't try to come closer." "Would you have wanted him to?" I asked. "I don't know, maybe. 7 years is a long time." Sophie nodded slowly. "Father Anthony says he's assistant director at the shelter now, helps run the whole food program, never mentions us, never asks about us, just works." They'd been tracking their father's progress through Father Anthony, who served as an inadvertent messenger of David's transformation. 7 years of consistent work, service, sobriety. No attempts at contact beyond the steady restitution payments that now totaled $30,000 every penny he could spare from minimum wage work. "There's something else," Sophie said, pulling out an envelope. This came to school, addressed to both of us. Inside was a single sheet of paper in David's handwriting. "Your 18th birthday means the restraining order expires. It also means you're adults who can make your own choices about who belongs in your lives. I'm writing only to say, that choice is entirely yours. I'll respect any decision, continued distance, limited contact, or anything in between. I'm at the shelter Tuesday and Thursday evenings if you ever want to talk. If not, know that I'm proud of who you've become despite my failures. You deserved better parents. I'm grateful you got the grandmother you needed, David. No manipulation, no guilt, no demands. Just an acknowledgement and an open door they could choose to walk through or ignore." "What do you want to do?" I asked them. "We've been thinking about it for months," Danny admitted. "Sophie and I have talked through every scenario. And we want to see him. Once, together, in public. To say things that need saying before we leave for college." 3 days later, I drove them to the shelter. They insisted I come but wait in the car, moral support within shouting distance. I watched them walk through those doors, my brave grandchildren facing the ghosts that had haunted their childhood. They were inside for 2 hours. When they emerged, both had been crying, but they walked steadier somehow, like they'd set down weights they'd been carrying. "We told him everything," Sophie said once we were driving home. "How the kidnapping affected us, how his addiction made us feel worthless, how we spent years wondering if we'd inherit his weaknesses." "What did he say?" "He listened," Danny said. "Just listened. Didn't defend, didn't excuse, didn't minimize. When we were done, he said, 'You're right about all of it. I was those things. I did that damage. It's documented history that can't be revised.' Then he said something strange," Sophie added. "He said, 'But you're not me. You're not your mother. You're evidence that genetics isn't destiny, that you can choose who to become. Are you going to see him again?'" They looked at each other, conducting their silent twin conversation. "Maybe," Danny said finally. "Not as father and children. That relationship died in a motel room when I was 9. But maybe as humans trying to understand how people break and sometimes rebuild." That evening, a different letter arrived, this one forwarded through Martha from federal prison. Emily had served 7 years of her 24-year sentence. The envelope was thick, legal-sized. Inside were documents, not a letter, but a signed affidavit. Emily was testifying against Patricia Whitman in a new case. David's mother had defrauded 3 more elderly victims, and Emily was providing evidence of the training she'd received, the methods Patricia had taught her. A sticky note in Martha's handwriting explained, "Emily gains nothing from this testimony, no sentence reduction, no privileges. She says she wants to stop her mother-in-law from creating more versions of herself." It was the first genuinely selfless thing Emily had done in decades. Perhaps prison had finally broken through her narcissism, or perhaps she simply wanted to hurt the woman who'd helped shape her into a monster. Either way, 3 elderly victims would get justice. The next morning, over breakfast, I gave Danny and Sophie their graduation presents, not the expected cards with money, but 2 leather-bound books. "The recipes?" Sophie gasped, recognizing the format immediately. "You copied Grandpa Robert's book?" "Not copied." Continued. "Your book, Sophie, has all the recipes plus the stories behind them, the real ones, including the hard truths. Danny, yours has the same recipes but annotated with nutritional information, cost per serving calculations, and scaling formulas for feeding large groups efficiently." "Why now?" Danny asked, running his fingers over the leather. "Because you're ready. Because these recipes were never just about food, they were about sustaining people through difficult times. You both understand that now. But the original stays with Carlos and Maria at Sullivan's kitchen, where it belongs. But the knowledge, the stories, the truth that travels with you." That afternoon, we visited Sullivan's kitchen one last time before the twins left for college. The Margaret Sullivan Foundation had served its 100,000th free meal that week. The wall of photos had expanded to include success stories, food truck owners, restaurant workers, culinary school graduates, all launched through the foundation's programs. Carlos and Maria's children worked alongside them now, the older ones skilled in the kitchen, baby Margaret toddling between tables charming customers. The restaurant pulsed with life, with purpose, with the kind of love that couldn't be stolen or corrupted. "Mrs. Sullivan," James called out, "now floor manager, your table is ready." Margaret's table, permanently reserved, set for 3 as always. We sat for our final meal before everything changed, before college scattered us, before life moved us into new chapters. Halfway through dinner, David emerged from the kitchen in his chef's whites, not approaching but visible, part of the ecosystem but not intruding on our space. He'd found his place not forgiven but functional, not family but not enemy, existing in the complicated middle ground that real life often requires. "I have something to tell you both," I said as dessert arrived. Robert's apple pie, made with Sophie's innovative crust technique and Danny's calculated perfect sugar ratio. "I'm selling the cottage." Their shock was immediate. "But Grandma, I'm 78, you're leaving for college. That big house doesn't make sense anymore. I've bought a small apartment here in Boston near both your schools. 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for whichever of you needs a place to study or escape campus. But the cottage is our home." "No," I said gently, "we made it a home." "But home isn't a building, it's wherever we choose to love each other." The cottage was our healing place. Now it's time for new chapters. They cried a little, these 18-year-olds who'd grown up too fast but retained their capacity for genuine emotion. Then Sophie raised her water glass. "To new chapters. To choosing who we become," Danny added. "To family," I concluded. "Blood and chosen, broken and healing, lost and found." If this moment truly hit home for you, don't forget to tap that like button. It tells me you're right here with me. Can you see a bit of yourself in this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what part spoke to you most. As we toasted, I saw Emily in Danny's determined eyes, Robert in Sophie's gentle smile, David in their shared caution, and myself in their resilience. We were all there, the good and bad mixed together, creating something new from broken pieces. The twins would leave for college, carrying recipe books and trust funds, trauma and triumph, the knowledge that people could be both terrible and redeemable. They would build lives conscious of their heritage but not confined by it. And I would continue my own story, not as the betrayed mother or the raising grandmother, but as Margaret Sullivan, 78 years old, still learning, still growing, still choosing love over bitterness every single day. The cycle hadn't just been broken, it had been transformed into something useful, like compost becoming fertile soil. From destruction had come growth, from betrayal had come wisdom, from pain had come purpose. And from 2 damaged parents had come 2 extraordinary young adults who would feed the world in ways their parents had only known how to consume it. The call came at 2 a.m, 3 years into their college journeys. Sophie's voice on the phone was strange, not panicked, but shaken in a way I hadn't heard since childhood. "Grandma, I'm at Mass General. Don't worry, I'm not hurt. But Mom's here." My blood went cold. Emily wasn't supposed to be out for another 14 years. "Compassionate release," Sophie explained when I arrived. Danny already there, both of them standing in the hospital corridor like guardians. Stage 4, liver cancer. The prison doctor gave her 3 months. She's been here for 2 days before anyone notified us. Through the observation window, I saw my daughter for the first time in 10 years. Emily at 51 looked 70, rail-thin, yellow-tinged skin, the aggressive vitality that had driven her schemes reduced to labored breathing. "She's been asking for you," the nurse said gently. "Says she has something important to tell you about your husband." "She already told me about Robert's affair," I said flatly. "That manipulation won't work twice." "Grandma," Danny said quietly, "what if it's something else? What if she dies with information we needed?" Sophie nodded. "We've been talking to her doctor. The cancer's real. She's not faking this. She's actually dying." The word hung between us, dying. Emily, who'd seemed indestructible in her greed, was mortal after all. "You don't have to see her," Danny said. "We just thought you should know." I looked at my grandchildren, 21 now, Danny about to graduate MIT with honors, Sophie directing plays that made audiences weep. They'd become everything Emily hadn't been: compassionate, honest, generous with their talents. "What do you think I should do?" They exchanged glances. "Closure isn't for her," Sophie said carefully. "It's for you. The question is whether you need it." I entered Emily's room alone. She was awake, staring at the ceiling, and didn't turn when I approached. "Took you long enough," she said, her voice a rasp of its former sharpness. "I didn't come for you. I came for them, Danny and Sophie. They seem to think you have something worth saying." Emily finally turned her head, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before: genuine fear. "I'm dying," she said simply. "So I'm told. Liver cancer. Ironic, isn't it? I never drank much. That was David's vice. But apparently, genetics doesn't care about irony." "What do you want, Emily?" She struggled to sit up slightly. "To tell you something about Dad. Something I didn't tell you before, because I was saving it as leverage that I never got to use." "More lies about Robert?" "No. Truth. Dad didn't have an affair." The room seemed to tilt. "You said." "I lied. Or rather, I believed my own lie for so long it became truth in my mind. Dad met with Karen Mitchell that day, yes. But not for an affair. She was leaving Tom because Tom was embezzling from the restaurant. Dad was trying to convince her to stay, to work it out, to not destroy their marriage over money. My legs gave out. I sank into the bedside chair. I followed him, saw them embrace her crying, him comforting. I was 12, angry that he'd missed my recital for work, and I assumed the worst. When I confronted him, he tried to explain, but I wouldn't listen. I screamed that I'd tell you he was cheating, unless he promised to make it up to me. The life insurance. The building. He bought them the next day, yes, but not out of guilt for cheating, out of desperation to prove he loved us. He tried to explain about Tom and Karen, but I didn't believe him, or I didn't want to. The narrative of betrayal gave me power over him. Then he died, I whispered. The stress of his best friend's betrayal, his inability to tell you without destroying the Mitchells, and his 12-year-old daughter's blackmail. His heart couldn't take it. You killed him with a lie. Yes. No defiance, no justification, just acknowledgement. I've had 10 years in a cell to think about it. The lie became my foundation. If Dad was a cheater, then everyone was corrupt. Everyone had a price. Love was a transaction. It justified everything I did to you. Why tell me now? Because I'm dying with nothing. No money, no family, no legacy except destruction. But maybe, if you know the truth, you can tell Danny and Sophie that their grandfather was actually a good man. That there's good in their bloodline, not just greed and betrayal. They already know there's good. They chose to cultivate it despite you and David. Emily closed her eyes. I know. Father Anthony visits sometimes, tells me about David's work at the shelter, shows me photos of the kids, their achievements, their kindness. They became everything I couldn't be. By choice, Emily, they chose to be good. While I chose to be poison. She opened her eyes again. There's one more thing. Patricia, my mother-in-law, she's dead, died in prison last year. But before she died, she wrote something. A confession. Emily pulled out a folded paper from under her pillow. She trained me, but I wasn't her first pupil. She'd done the same thing to David's older brother, drove him to suicide at 25 after she'd stripped him of his trust fund. David never knew. She let him think his brother was weak, couldn't handle pressure, but she'd destroyed him systematically, just like she taught me to destroy you. I read Patricia's confession, a detailed accounting of how she'd turned her own children into either victims or weapons, generation after generation of damage radiating from one woman's pathological greed. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Because I was proud to be chosen. To be the one she trained instead of destroyed. I thought I was special. Emily laughed bitterly, then coughed, specks of blood on her lips. Turns out I was just the most useful tool. What do you want from me, Emily? Forgiveness? No, that's not possible, and I wouldn't insult you by asking. I want you to tell Danny and Sophie the truth. All of it. That their grandfather was good, that evil can be taught, that they've broken a cycle that goes back generations. They already know they've broken the cycle, but they don't know how far back it goes, how many people Patricia destroyed before me, how David and I were both her victims before we became perpetrators. Victims who chose to create more victims. Yes, I'm not excusing it, just contextualizing it. A knock at the door interrupted us. Sophie entered, followed by Danny. The nurse said visiting hours are almost over. Sophie said gently. Emily looked at her children, young adults now, accomplished and whole despite their broken beginnings. You both look like him, she said suddenly. Like Robert. Good. That's good. We look like ourselves, Danny said firmly but not unkindly. Better. That's better. Emily turned back to me. I have maybe 6 weeks. The state will cremate me, scatter the ashes wherever. I'm not asking you to claim me. Just tell them I'm sorry. Not for my sake. For theirs. So they know their mother was capable of recognizing wrong, even if too late to matter. I stood to leave, then paused. Robert would have forgiven you. He always saw the best in people, even when it wasn't there. But you won't. I see people as they are, not as I wish they were. You're a dying woman who destroyed multiple lives for money that's all gone. But you're also the mother of 2 remarkable people who salvaged beauty from your wreckage. Both things are true. As we left, Sophie looked back once. Should we visit again? That's your choice, I said, but choose based on what you need, not what she needs. I need to understand, Danny said slowly, how someone becomes that broken. Not to excuse it, but to make sure I never break that same way. And I need to perform forgiveness, Sophie added, not feel it, but perform it. Theater taught me that sometimes the performance becomes real through repetition. They visited Emily twice more before she died, brief visits where they spoke of inconsequential things, the weather, their classes, books they'd read. They didn't forgive or forget, but they witnessed. They saw their mother die human-sized, not as the monster of their nightmares, but as a broken woman who'd chosen wrong until choices ran out. Emily died on a Tuesday morning in November. The twins and I were there, not holding her hand but present in the room. Her last words were, "Tell Robert I'm sorry." We cremated her with dignity but without ceremony. The ashes were scattered in Boston Harbor, returning nothing to nothing, leaving only the lessons of her life as legacy. That evening, in my small Boston apartment where the twins often stayed between classes, we cooked Robert's brown bread together. As it baked, filling the space with warmth and comfort, Sophie said something profound. She gave us life, then showed us how not to live it. In a way, that's its own kind of gift. Danny nodded. We know exactly who not to become. And in knowing that, they knew exactly who they were, not products of generational trauma, but architects of generational healing. The poison stopped with them. The good would continue. 5 years had passed since Emily's death, and I stood in the grand ballroom of the Boston Ritz-Carlton, watching Danny and Sophie accept the James Beard Foundation's Humanitarian Award. At 26, they had built something extraordinary from the ashes of their childhood, not despite their trauma, but because of the knowledge it had given them about hunger, both physical and emotional. The Sullivan Foundation Food Network now operates in 30 cities, Danny said at the podium, his MIT engineering degree evident in the precision of his words. We serve 3 million meals annually to those experiencing food insecurity. But this isn't charity, it's education, it's dignity, it's recognizing that hunger is a systemic problem requiring systemic solutions. Sophie took the microphone, her theatrical training making every word resonate. Our grandmother taught us that feeding people is the highest form of love. Our parents taught us what happens when love becomes transactional. Both lessons shaped who we are today. I sat at the head table, now 83, my hands no longer steady enough to cook, but my mind still sharp enough to guide. Beside me sat David, yes, David, who had become the Foundation's Director of Recovery Services after 15 years of consistent sobriety and service. The reconciliation hadn't been sudden or dramatic. It had been built meal by meal, conversation by conversation, year by year. Not forgiveness exactly, but something more complex. An acknowledgement that broken people could choose to become something else, that redemption was possible, even if restoration wasn't. Mrs. Sullivan, a young reporter approached during the reception. Your family's story has become required reading in social work programs as a case study in breaking generational trauma. How does that feel? Like knowledge being put to good use, I replied. Every family has its demons. Ours were greed, manipulation, and betrayal. But demons lose their power when you drag them into the light and examine them with clear eyes. Carlos and Maria's eldest daughter, Margaret, my namesake, now 21, rushed over with tears in her eyes. Abuela Margaret, Danny just announced that every Sullivan Kitchen location will have a full scholarship program for immigrant youth, full culinary education, living stipend, job placement, everything. The knowledge that my legacy would be education rather than exploitation, service rather than schemes, filled me with a peace I'd never imagined possible when Emily first demanded I move to a nursing home all those years ago. Later that evening, in a private moment, David approached me. His hands shook slightly, not from withdrawal, but from emotion. "Margaret," he said, "I need to tell you something. I've been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. The doctors say I have maybe 10 good years left." The irony wasn't lost on me, the man who'd tried to have me declared incompetent now facing his own decline. "Danny and Sophie don't know yet," he continued. "I wanted to tell you first because I need to know they'll be okay when I'm gone. That they have enough support, enough love, enough stability to weather another loss." "They've weathered worse," I said, not unkindly. "They buried their mother's ashes with dignity. They'll do the same for you, but with genuine grief. You earned that much, David. You earned their complex love through 15 years of choosing right over easy." He nodded, tears falling freely. "I think about that motel room every day. Danny locked in that bathroom, terrified. That was my lesson in what addiction costs, not just money or freedom, but the trust of a 9-year-old boy who deserved better. And you learned from it. That's the difference between you and Emily. She died believing she was right. You chose to live knowing you were wrong and working to make amends. The truth of generational patterns sat between us. Patricia had created Emily and David, who had created trauma for Danny and Sophie, who had transformed that trauma into service. The education came not from books, but from living through the consequences of others' choices and choosing differently. "Grandma?" Sophie appeared, radiant in her success but still seeking my approval like the 11-year-old who'd drawn pictures of our family. "There's someone here who wants to meet you." She led me to a corner where a middle-aged woman sat nervously. I recognized her immediately, Rebecca Whitman, Patricia's daughter who had testified against her mother years ago. "Mrs. Sullivan," Rebecca said, standing shakily. "I'm sorry to intrude. I wanted to thank you. Your grandchildren's foundation helped my son get clean, get trained, get employed. He's a sous chef now at one of Carlos's restaurants. The cycle that my mother started, that destroyed so many of us, your family ended it. The knowledge that poison could be transformed into medicine, that the worst experiences could become the greatest teachers, filled the room with an almost sacred energy. Every family has the power to choose," I told Rebecca, "to continue patterns or break them. Your son chose to break them, just like Danny and Sophie did." As the evening wound down, I found myself on the balcony overlooking Boston Harbor, the same waters where we'd scattered Emily's ashes. Danny and Sophie joined me, one on each side, their arms around me for support and love. "You know what I learned?" Sophie said quietly. "That education isn't just about school. It's about learning from everyone, the good examples and the terrible warnings. Mom and Dad were terrible warnings. You were the good example. Both were necessary for us to become who we are." Danny nodded. "The real lesson wasn't about money or restaurants or even family. It was about choice. Every day, we choose who to become. Mom chose greed, until it killed her. Dad chose redemption, even though it came too late for full restoration. And we choose service because we know what it feels like to be hungry for more than food." "And what do I choose?" I asked, curious about their perception. "You choose love," they said in unison. "Every day, despite every reason not to, you choose love." As fireworks lit up the harbor, the gala's finale, I thought about the journey from that morning when Emily demanded I leave my own home. The knowledge gained through pain, the education through experience, the lessons that could only be learned by living through them. My dear viewers of Voices of Auntie Rose, this story of the Sullivan family is not just a tale of betrayal and redemption, it's a mirror reflecting the choices we all face. How many of us have family members who see us as resources rather than people? How many of us have had to choose between enabling and empowering? How many of us have learned that blood doesn't determine family, but rather our actions and choices do? The knowledge I want to leave you with is this: patterns can be broken. The education might be painful, but it's powerful. The lessons learned from both good and bad examples shape us, but don't define us. We define ourselves through our daily choices. What did you feel listening to Margaret's journey? Have you faced similar betrayals or difficult choices with family? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear from your heart to understand how these universal struggles manifest in your unique life. If this story touched you, please subscribe to Voices of Auntie Rose and hit that notification bell. Every day, we explore the complex realities of family, love, and the choices that define us. Like and share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone in their family struggles. Remember, whether you're the Margaret in your story giving until it hurts, or the Danny and Sophie breaking generational curses, or even the David seeking redemption after causing harm, your story matters. Your choices matter. Your education through experience matters. The greatest lesson from the Sullivan story is that love isn't measured in dollars or blood relations, but in the daily choice to show up, to serve others, and to break the cycles that would otherwise break us. I wish all of you watching today good health, joyful lives, and the peace that comes from knowing you have the power to choose who you become, regardless of who you were raised to be. May you find strength in Margaret's resilience, hope in Danny and Sophie's transformation, and perhaps even compassion for the Emilys in your life who lost themselves to greed. Until we meet again in tomorrow's video, remember, you are not defined by your family's failures but by your own choices. Thank you for listening, for sharing your hearts in the comments, and for being part of the Voices of Auntie Rose family. Goodbye for now, and see you in our next story, where we'll explore another family's journey from brokenness to beauty. Take care of yourselves and each other.